Chapter 130. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. The night squad once again set out for the northern Thorns Ridge. The successful cleanup of the southern Thorns Ridge boosted the squad's morale, and the young faces of the retainer knight had a trace of killing intent written on them. However, the main force of the cleanup squad wasn't the retainer knight, Marcus, or List. Instead, it was Dosen. It had become belligerent and energetic, practically tireless. From a small squirrel to a World of Warcraft's ice tree frog, everything was brutally ravaged by it. In particular, the low-ranked World of Warcraft's ice tree frog, which crouched on a branch and released the magic ice blade, randomly bombarding Dosen. However, Dosen had even learned to climb trees by himself. Despite the ice tree frog madly jumping, Dosen still pounced on it and bit it to death in a few bites, not even using rock thorns. The graceful bearing of the King of Thorns Ridge had already taken shape. Even if Dosen isn't an intermediate World of Warcraft, it isn't far from it. Sir, its fighting strength is getting stronger and stronger. I feel that it is still growing stronger. Marcus exclaimed in admiration when he saw Dosen holding the ice tree frog in its mouth, wagging its tail, and eagerly placing the spoils of war next to Black Dragon. Raising a World of Warcraft with fighting strength, loyalty, and courage was really too practical. List happily threw out a fried meat strip to reward Dosen. Dosen was a very picky eater. It didn't eat raw food and liked fried food the most. At first, I thought that the bloodline fruit was a failure, that it couldn't change its bloodline, and that it was still a flying dust dog. But now, I can't easily come to a conclusion. Teacher Marcus, don't you feel that after 2 days in the Thorns Ridge, Dosen's body has grown a size? It has indeed grown a size. The current Dosen is as big as a tiger. An adult flying dust dog was at most comparable to the size of a leopard. Now, Dosen had reached the size of a tiger and was still growing. List waved his hand, and Dosen scurried out again to continue its hunting mission. No matter what, Dosen is only half a year old. He's not an adult yet, but he's already this strong. When he becomes an adult, I'm afraid that no one below intermediate World of Warcraft will be his match. World of Warcraft generally developed quickly, but Dosen was obviously faster. In the castle, List had never mistreated it, serving it lavishly. Compared to normal World of Warcraft players who ate raw food in the forest, Dosen always ate cooked food, which was more nutritious. In less than 3 months, he could cast magic, and in half a year, he could fight against an adult in World of Warcraft. After eating the bloodline fruit, his body and mana skyrocketed, allowing him to crush World of Warcraft to the ground. When Dosen became an adult, apart from the purple sand crocodile, no one in Coral Island World of Warcraft would be a match for Dosen. While they were talking, Dosen encountered another World of Warcraft. It was a huge Thundertusk boar followed by 4 small Thundertusk boars. It was likely to be the same family as the Thundertusk boar in the south of the Thorns Ridge. Facing Dosen, the big boar was quite violent, but Dosen was far more cunning than imagined. He circled around and pounced, biting the small boar to death. He did not confront the big boar head-on. After the big boar's magic thunderbolt flash was exhausted, Dosen began to release rock thorns to tease the big boar. Finally, he found an opportunity to knock the Thundertusk boar to the ground, followed up with a rockthorn, pierced the Thundertusk boar's neck, and sent the boar's entire family back. Marcus held a bow and arrow, but basically had no opportunity to use it. The timing of the magic release is just right. Dosen is very intelligent. Sir's training is very effective. List was similarly idle. It is indeed very intelligent. World of Warcraft relies on instinct while it relies on its brain. The more he looked at Dosen, the more satisfied he was. With Dosen, the cleanup mission was as easy as playing. Marcus did not let the retainer knight idle. When they encountered a lone Windblade wolf, he had List call back Dosen, and then arranged for the retainer knight to besiege the Windblade wolf. This is an old and feeble Windblade wolf. It has already begun to shed its fur. It should have been driven out by the pack of wolves. I'll leave it to you. In the end, at the cost of 3 injured retainer knight, the 10 retainer knight jointly besieged and killed the Windblade wolf. The prey hung from a tree. The team continued deeper. They were about to reach the seaside, which meant that the northern Thorns Ridge was about to be cleansed. The harvest was not very bountiful. There were only 1 big and 4 small thundertusk boars, 1 ice tree frog, and 1 windblade wolf, for a total of 6 World of Warcraft. A lot of wild beasts were hunted, but List had no interest in them. After getting used to eating World of Warcraft meat, wild beast meat could only be regarded as inferior food. Unfortunately, the Thorns Woods are about to disappear. The Flower Town will no longer have a habitat for World of Warcraft. In the future, if I want to eat World of Warcraft meat, I can only buy it outside. The harvest from the cleanup of the Thorns Ridge was enough for him to eat for about half a year. After eating it, he would have to spend a lot of money to buy World of Warcraft meat. Marcus was very open-minded. When the Thorns Ridge is developed into farmland, the castle's tax revenue will be greatly increased. Sir can naturally use gold coins to buy World of Warcraft meat. Moreover, at that time, the black tulip and flame mushroom magic ingredients will also bring in a lot of income. The Flower Town will become more and more prosperous. I still have to open up more sources of income. In the future, not only will I have to eat, but I will also have to nurture the Night Squad. The success of the World of Warcraft hunt gave rise to List's ambition. I hope that my knight can obtain true glory for me in the next development order. Lord needs more land. Marcus's eyes shone. I am willing to serve, sir. Woof woof. Dosen suddenly shouted, interrupting the beautiful vision of the Lord and the knight. List conveniently released magic eyes and looked around. Then, he saw signs of magic in the distance. A World of Warcraft was lurking not far away. I didn't expect to find a World of Warcraft so close to the seaside. Dosen, go. After receiving the order, Dosen dashed forward and rushed towards the World of Warcraft. It had clearly sensed the World of Warcraft's aura earlier than List. List and the others followed it unhurriedly. From time to time, Dosen's barks could be heard, as well as the barking of another dog. I didn't expect there to be a flying dust dog. Marcus deduced from the barks that the World of Warcraft was a flying dust dog. That's normal. For flying dust dogs to reproduce in the Thorns Ridge, it is impossible for there to be only 2 or 3 of them. In fact, I think that there might be some fish that slipped through the net. The Thorns Ridge is unlikely to have only 1 shadow snake or 1 ice tree frog. There might even be winged peregrine falcons in the vicinity. After a pause, List continued. Of course, it's hard to say. 18 years ago, when the Flower Town had yet to be built, this place was covered in forests, which were cleared out by the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry. The shadow snake and the ice tree frog might have slipped through the net at that time. After all, World of Warcraft can live for many years. Compared to ordinary wild beasts, World of Warcraft had a longer lifespan. In theory, they could live to the present. The Flying Dust Dog, Windblade Wolf, and Thundertusk Boar had all found breeding partners and could continue to reproduce. As for the Shadow Snake and the Ice Tree Frog, there was a great chance that they would go extinct, but their bloodlines might continue. They could copulate with wild beasts. There was no absolute reproductive isolation between World of Warcraft and wild beasts of the same species. It was a common occurrence for World of Warcraft to rape wild beasts and give birth to World of Warcraft beasts. List's mount, Fire Dragon, was a descendant of World of Warcraft's fiery horse and an ordinary horse. The reproduction of a species was always up and down. Sometimes it would evolve, sometimes it would decline. World of Warcraft would not always be World of Warcraft. Suddenly. Chapter 131. When List approached on horseback, he saw a scene that was hard to look at. Dosen was actually riding on the Flying Dust Dog, constantly shaking and panting with its tongue hanging out. The flying dust dog under his crotch should be a female dog. It wanted to struggle but could not, and could only let out a series of screams. Seeing a human approaching, it instinctively wanted to escape, but Dosen just pressed it down, using its sturdy body to forcibly keep the female flying dust dog in place. Ouch! List frowned in disgust. Such a shameless act of violence was actually happening in broad daylight. Was it a twisted dog or a moral degeneration? Was it an outburst of sex or a helpless thirst? He turned his head and asked, "Teacher Marcus, Dosen should only be a half-year-old puppy, right? When we found Dosen, it had not opened its eyes yet, so it was definitely born not long ago. Therefore, Dosen should not be very old. It is definitely not a year old, at most 7 months old." "A 7-month-old dog can do this kind of thing?" Marcus gave a rare smile. "Sir, dogs and humans are definitely different. With Dosen's age, it is indeed a bit early, but it is not uncommon for dogs to start mating before a year old. It can only be said that Dosen has developed very well, and with the stimulation of the bloodline fruit, it should be completely mature." List used to raise dogs in his hometown, but that was when he was a child. Moreover, the rural dogs did not care about when they were in heat or when they were messing around. Basically, they were a group of dogs that would stick together when they had nothing to do. After hearing Marcus's explanation, he was no longer surprised. Standing not far away, he enjoyed the action blockbuster. Dosen's physical strength was very good. From the time it heard the screams to the time it stopped moving, it had lasted for about 20 minutes. But the end of the movement did not mean that the matter was over. The two flying dust dogs were obviously like ordinary dogs. They did not immediately separate and were still connected. Woof woof. Dosen seemed a little confused and barked twice. The female violent dog stopped screaming and wanted to escape, but she couldn't pull Dosen away. She could only stare blankly at the night vigilantly, ready to release magic at any time. However, the distance between it and the night was beyond the range of its magic, so the rock thorns could not attack the humans. Strangely enough, it did not attack Dosen either. "Sir, should we take this opportunity to kill this flying dust dog?" Marcus picked up his bow and arrow, eager to give it a try. At this time, the female flying dust dog was a live target. "No." List immediately stopped her. If the bitch went berserk, wouldn't it drag Dosen to death? He had seen a video of a female dog dragging a male dog by the side of the road. Her steps were light, but the male dog seemed to be dead. "Teacher Marcus, think of a way to capture this female flying dust dog alive and raise her in the castle. Now, it seems that Dosen is already an adult and can breed offspring. Perhaps I can get a group of flying dust dogs. But the female flying dust dog is wild and difficult to tame. It is very dangerous. Then tie her up with an iron chain, delimit the surrounding 20 meters as a restricted area, and then build a rock wall around it. After she gives birth to a batch of puppies, then take the puppies away. In any case, there are not many flying dust dogs on the Coral Island. Dosen will always need female dogs. That is also a way." Marcus nodded, then turned to the retainer knight and said, "Take out the net. Jim and York, go to the tree on the left. Philip and Sean, go to the tree on the right. Xavier and Tracy, go to the tree behind. Surround the flying dust dog. If it tries to escape, immediately catch it with the net." The knight cautiously approached and climbed up the tree. One of them pulled one end of the net rope, ready to cast the net. About 20 minutes later, the two flying dust dogs naturally separated. The female flying dust dog immediately turned around to escape. The prepared Marcus immediately ordered, "Prepare to cast the net." The knight immediately threw away the rope in their hands, and a large net enveloped the female flying dust dog. The female flying dust dog was very fast, but not as fast as the knight. It was directly covered by the large net. It hurriedly released magic. Rock thorns pierced the ground, but these rock thorns only pushed the net away and could not pierce the large net. It struggled to escape, but the net became tighter and tighter. Eventually, it was tightly bound and could not budge. The rock thorns pierced randomly until it exhausted its magic power, but it still could not escape. Woof woof. Dosen just watched from the side. He neither pounced on it to bite it, nor did he walk away. He just barked at the female flying dust dog from time to time, but the meaning was unclear. Its magic power should be exhausted. Go down and tie it up. First, tie its mouth. Marcus tried a few times and came to a conclusion. Soon, the female flying dust dog was firmly tied up, especially its mouth. Even if it recovered its magic power, it could not easily release magic. Woof woof, with its mouth and limbs bound, the female flying dust dog kept growling angrily. However, its fate was already sealed. It would become Dosen's plaything and the flying dust dog's reproduction machine. Woof woof. Wagging his tail, Dosen circled around the female flying dust dog and barked. It was unknown whether he was comforting it or not. This should be the last World of Warcraft, right? List quietly summoned the smoke mission. Judging through the smoke mission was the most intuitive manifestation. However, there was no change in the smoke serpentines. Mission: you have launched an attack and are determined to clean up the Thorns Ridge and create a new peaceful environment for the Flower Town. Therefore, complete the massacre of all World of Warcraft in the Thorns Ridge in one go. Reward: the trail of the Black Dragon horses. He couldn't help but frown. There is still World of Warcraft? He had already thoroughly searched the Thorns Ridge. With the help of magic eyes, it was reasonable to say that all the World of Warcraft that could be found within his line of sight had already been found. It seemed that the World of Warcraft had avoided being cleaned up while his magic eyes was recovering. Sir, we are almost at the seaside. Should we go back? Marcus asked. List pondered for a moment and then said, There is no hurry. Let's go to the seaside and take a look. I heard from Costo that there is a deep-water port near the seaside. Let's take a look at it and make plans as soon as possible to build the Flower Town's dock. As you wish. The team moved on. Trembling Woods was attracted by the beauty and lost his interest in hunting. He kept circling around the flying dust dog. Fortunately, the journey was very smooth. They didn't even see 2 or 3 wild beasts before they reached the seaside. After walking along the seaside for a difficult stony path, they arrived at the place Costo had mentioned. It was a several 100-meter wide rocky beach. On the left was a rocky mountain ridge, and on the right was a rocky mountain ridge. Only the area in the middle was only littered with large and small gravel. With a bit of cleaning, a flat area could be cleared. Costo wasn't lying. A large seaport could not be built here, but a small and medium-sized dock was not a problem. After walking around the rocky area, List suddenly had an idea. On the way back, we will go directly in the direction of the dairy farm. First, we will look for a flat road. Then, we will have the logging team start cutting down trees and open a road to this place as soon as possible. The stones near the dock can be pulled back to build a road. This will be the starting point of the Flower Town's future. He reached out and made a circle on the rocky beach. Chapter 132. Because the mission had not yet been completed, List returned to the castle to rest for a day, and then continued to take Dosen and the retainer knight to the Thorns Ridge. He was ready to hunt down the fish that escaped the net. The female flying dust dog was still tied up. In order to grind away its fierceness, List decided to starve it for 3 to 5 days so that it could not release magic to hurt people. At the same time, the Thorns caravan had been arranged to go to North Valley City to order an iron cage. It was destined to spend the rest of its life in an iron cage. Perhaps one day it would become familiar with its new life, follow Dosen, and regain its freedom. Dosen should be able to deal with it. After all, Dosen is an existence that almost became an intermediate world of Warcraft. List was very confident about this. Flying dust dogs may not live in packs in World of Warcraft, but it was the consistent character of World of Warcraft to submit to the strong. Moreover, it was a male and a female. Woof woof! Dosen, who was chasing its tail in circles in the distance, felt a little dizzy. Still too young. Since it has become your wife, it's time to give it a name. It is a flying dust dog, and it is also your wife, so call it Stupid Woman. Lys seriously thought of a name. Dosen, do you agree with this name? If you agree, bark twice. Woof woof. Dosen, who was still chasing its tail, expressed its approval. Lys entered the Thorns Ridge again. Without Stupid Woman to attract his attention, Dosen regained the demeanor of the king of Thorns Ridge. Along the way, he kept looking for beasts to kill, or all of them were lone beasts that had escaped the net. Unfortunately, another 3 days passed. He did not find any World of Warcraft. Lys felt that his magic eyes were so proficient that he could use them seamlessly and keep them open 24 hours a day. There was still no sign of magic, as if World of Warcraft had hidden under the surface and begun to pass the winter. It was the end of summer and the beginning of autumn, so it was impossible to hibernate. So, where are the fish that escaped the net hiding? Riding on Black Dragon, Lys looked at the logging team that was cutting down trees in full swing not far away, feeling somewhat conflicted. If he didn't complete the quest, he wouldn't be able to get the clue to the Black Dragon horses that he wanted. The clue was probably hidden in the Thorns Forest, but he had already cleaned it twice and still hadn't found any clues. He could only pin his hopes on completing the quest. If he couldn't find it, then he couldn't find it. In the end, Lys could only order Teacher Marcus lead the retainer knight to continue training in the Thorns Ridge and protect the logging team. If you encounter a World of Warcraft, fight if you can and flee if you can't. Yes, my lord. The smoke mission was a difficult problem. Spoil the mood. However, it was not that there was no good news in the past few days. The crystal craftsman had successfully ground the required concave and convex lenses, a total of 20 pieces. Lys experimented with random combinations and found that a convex lens and a concave lens could form a telescope. 2 convex lenses could also form a telescope, but the image was inverted. He naturally chose a combination of convex and concave lenses, and had the blacksmith shop's blacksmith and the carpenter shop's carpenter work together to create the lens tube. The lens tube was about 1 meter long, and after embedding the lens, the magnification wasn't high. However, Lys was already very satisfied and named it the Lys telescope. At night, he aimed the telescope at the moon in the sky. After fine-tuning the distance of the lens, the dark areas of the moon were immediately captured in his eyes. However, what made Lys feel strange was that the moon he saw actually had a hazy halo around it. Lys, who had a superficial understanding of astronomy, quickly recognized it. Atmosphere. This moon actually has an atmosphere. If it has an atmosphere, it shouldn't be inhabited by intelligent life forms, right? He suddenly recalled that this world had all kinds of mystical legends about the moon. In some legends, the imperial family of the Unsetting Radiance Empire came from the moon. In some legends, the Elven King lived on the moon. In some legends, the moon was the homeland of dragons. In some legends, the most central mountain range of the continent, the Mulligaudan Mountain, had a magic teleportation array leading to the moon at its peak. Whoever could climb Mulligaudan Mountain and light the magic teleportation array would be able to grasp the endless wealth of the moon. This legend was a bit like the myth of Chang'e flying to the moon. Everyone knew it was fake, but in their hearts they yearned for it. The magic teleportation array was said to have been researched by ancient magic shooters. It was a huge magic that could cross time and space, but it had been lost a long time ago and only existed in legends. Mulligaudan Mountain was the highest mountain range on the continent, tens of thousands of meters high, and mortals simply could not climb to the top. Even riding a dragon, it was impossible to fly to the highest peak. The endless storms halfway up the mountain were more terrifying than the most powerful wind magic, and could twist people and dragons into pieces. As for the name Mullaghowden, it was a translation from a foreign language. To be precise, it was an ancient language called Language of the Moon. Language of the Moon was the language of the Moon Empire a long time ago, and now it was no longer used by any country. However, the languages of many countries were integrated with Language of the Moon, and even directly used some of the words of Language of the Moon. The term Mullaghowden meant Guardian Knight of the Moon Empire. Some people said that Mullaghowden Mountain meant Knight of the Moon Empire. There were also people who far-fetched and said that Mullaghowden Mountain meant Knight of the Magic Teleportation Array Between the Moons. In any case, Mullaghowden Mountain can lead to the moon was a legend that everyone knew. So, are these legends true or false? It is no longer appropriate to judge this world with the common sense of Earth. It is hard to say whether there are really people on the moon. Liszt used to be a staunch atheist, but now he had become an agnostic. There was no worship of God in this world, but there were all kinds of strange legends, which were very suitable for the development of agnosticism, even though he could not figure out the meaning of the moon. At the banquet that day, Liszt still announced in a loud voice, "The invention of the Liszt telescope is a major step forward in human exploration of the universe. It will unveil the veil of the universe and show it to all of us." He was very excited about his discovery and wanted to share it with the people. However, when his subordinates rushed to look at the telescope and used it to observe the moon, the feedback was somewhat disappointing. Gort looked at the moon and muttered, "Is this the moon? It looks really beautiful. Is it a big flat cake? Why are there no dragons and no elven king?" Blair looked at the moon and whispered, "The light of the moon is too weak, much weaker than the light of the sun. Some places seem to be about to be extinguished." The extinguished places he was talking about were the areas on the moon where the shadows were heavier. It might be the plains on Earth's moon, or it might be the real lunar sea. The magnification of Liszt's telescope was still not enough. At most, it could magnify by more than 30 times, so the observation of the moon was not clear enough. Moreover, there was the atmosphere blocking the view. Isaiah did not look at the moon. He wanted to see the stars, but there were only a few stars in the background of the moon. After looking at the moon, Marcus's face was very calm. "Sir, why are we looking at the moon? Ignorant natives." Liszt's original excitement had disappeared, and he felt lonely as if he was the only sober person among the crowd. Fortunately, he was very good at adjusting his state of mind, and the self-restraint of a noble quickly calmed him down. He smiled in a formal manner. "Not only can it see the moon, but it can also see far away. With the telescope, the scenery far away will be in front of you. You can use it to observe World of Warcraft." Chapter 133. Liszt's telescope was divided into long tubes and short tubes. The long tube was a telescope used to observe the moon, with a magnification of more than 30 times. The short tube was a portable telescope he was going to make for the night squad. It could be stretched and had a magnification of about 15 times at most. 20 concave and convex lenses could only form one long tube and 3 short tubes. The remaining lenses were unqualified. He threw the lenses to Carter. "Mr. Carter, look around and see which lens can magnify the image. You can use it to read books." Carter was old and his eyesight was a bit poor. Wouldn't it be nice to give him a magnifying glass? One long tube was left in the castle, 3 short tubes. Liszt carried one with him, Marcus Night Squad got one, and Carl Patrol Squad got one. The distribution was over. Originally, Liszt intended to retain the crystal craftsman Brad with a high salary, but the other party refused without hesitation. Although the flower town was developing rapidly, but compared to the Coral City, the gap was still huge. It could not attract free craftsmen with good social status. Similarly, Isaiah's family came to Flower Town to visit him, but when Isaiah persuaded them to stay, they refused without hesitation. His son even said, "Are you kidding me? There isn't even a brothel here." Gort's family also came to Flower Town to visit him. They stayed for 2 days and then left. After all, they were aristocrats. Their children and grandchildren had a good life, so they did not want to live in the countryside. His wife intended to settle in Flower Town, but Gort refused. The reason was very noble. Flower Town was too barren, and he did not want his wife to suffer. In fact, he was afraid that the other party would discover Freya's existence. Freya's belly was already bulging. "Sir Lord, I heard that you have invented a telescope that can see far away?" After hearing the news, Captain Costo hurried to the castle. "I wonder if the Flower can be equipped with a telescope? Sailing at sea requires a very good field of vision, and a telescope can provide us with great help." It was a very reasonable request. Liszt was a bit hesitant. The telescope suitable for sailing was probably the long Liszt telescope in the castle, but it was equipment for him to explore the universe. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Captain Costo, go back and train your apprentice sailors first. The logging team will soon open a path to the wharf. The Flower Town's wharf is about to be established. You can familiarize yourself with the situation near the wharf first. As for the binoculars, we will have them. Send Costo away." Liszt reluctantly took out a piece of crystal and handed it to Thomas. "When the Flower Town's transport team comes back, give it to the person in charge. Tell him to ask Brad Crystal Artisan to carve 2 sets of number 3 and number 17 lenses. The number 3 and no. 17 lenses were the lens models for assembling long tube. For Liszt, the binoculars were more like a joke. After studying it and playing with it for a while, he actually lost interest in the telescope. Looking at the moon and stars all day long, he couldn't see any secrets of the universe. Therefore, he took Trembling Woods out to inspect the work of the logging team, just to distract himself. To the north of the dairy farm, there was a large area of thorns and shrubs. This was the area covered by Thorn's worm stalk. In addition to ordinary thorns, there were also fast-growing varieties of thorns, including fast-growing poisonous thorns and fast-growing thorns. It was unknown if there was a follow-up to the Thorn's worm chain mission. Further northeast of the thorns and shrubs was the logging team's work site. The site was in full swing. Thick smoke billowed. Countless serfs were sweating as they cut down trees. Some people used axes to chop down tree trunks, some used saw blades to chop off tree branches, some used machetes to chop off branches and leaves, while others piled up tree trunks and branches together and took away the leaves and burned them on the spot. Burning the bonfires was not only to intimidate wild beasts and World of Warcraft, but also to accumulate plant ash, which would be composted when reclaiming wasteland in the future. Clerks and patrols shuttled back and forth among the serfs, frequently berating and cursing, urging the serfs to work hard. Gort, Isaiah, Blair, and Carl each commanded a large group of serfs to maintain order at the scene. Marcus took the night squad to seriously patrol the periphery. Seeing Liszt arrive, Gort trotted over. "Sir, good afternoon." "Good afternoon, Teacher Gort." Liszt greeted. "A quarter of the town's population should be cutting down trees here. How long do you think it will take to cut down all the trees in the Thorns Ridge?" "If we have enough tools, it will only take 20 days. No, it might only take 2 weeks. But we don't have enough tools, sir. Many people share an axe, a saw blade, and a machete, which is too much of a delay. Even if the serfs respond enthusiastically to your call, they still won't be able to exert their full strength. I have already had the flour caravan purchase tools from various cities. Iron tools are too expensive and bone tools are too brittle. I hope Father can plunder a batch of iron ore. Otherwise, the lack of iron on Coral Island will never be solved. There were no metals, no gems, and the number of elves was also scarce. The reason why the aristocrats were keen on fighting on the continent instead of staying on the island was often because they had no other choice. If they had foresight, they might develop technology to make up for this gap. But they didn't, so they could only plunder resources from the continent to make up for the deficiency. Why was the Eagle Kingdom repeatedly harassed by the Sapphire Kingdom? It was because they had the White Iron Dragon, which could produce a large amount of iron ore. Steel was probably the metal with the most practical value among all metals. Therefore, as long as the Steel Ridge Kingdom called for war, the Sapphire Grand Duke would immediately issue an order to expand, and the aristocrats would swarm over to burn, kill, and plunder. Liszt sometimes thought, why do I always feel that the Grand Duchy of Sapphire is a pirate from another world? Relying on their overseas establishment and well-developed fleet, they would unscrupulously attack the kingdoms on the continent. Snatch and run. Every year, he would repeat the same script. It was wonderful. Although there was no technical content, they were still successful every year. It was unknown how many times the Count had been to the continent. Little by little, he had accumulated such a large fortune on Coral Island. Sir, because of the logging work, the town's construction and road construction have been temporarily suspended. The autumn harvest is coming soon, and the barley settlement and wheat settlement may not have enough manpower. It won't be too late to transfer people back after the harvest date is determined. Liszt suddenly thought of something and looked at Gort. Teacher Gort, how long have you been with me to Flower Town? Gort was taken aback, and then said, Sir, on March 9th, the Baron of Flower Town was in theft. I set out the next day and arrived at Flower Town in the afternoon. Today is September 23rd, 6 months and 2 weeks have passed. 6.5 months passed in a flash. But the current Flower Town is definitely not the Flower Town of 6 months ago, which exudes vitality everywhere. Yes, I am very satisfied with the development of Flower Town. Liszt rode Black Dragon, walking slowly. The world in front of him had already integrated with him. What I am most satisfied with is the change in thinking. Teacher Gort, 6 months ago you were always talking about drinking. Now you know to finish your work first and then drink. You even delay drinking for work. Gort smiled awkwardly. People tend to slack off when they get older. Fortunately, I came to Flower Town and found the confidence and hard work of my youth. I am very pleased with the changes in you. Liszt looked into the distance and said, Maybe in a few days, a batch of 500 serfs will arrive. I need you to make a settlement plan. It is not enough to settle the serfs individually. I need an overall plan for the future of Flower Town or as a consultant. Hearing the word consultant. Chapter 134. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire followed the system of the Steel Ridge Kingdom. Knights were headed by the Patriarch of the Orders of Chivalry, while officials were headed by advisors. As Liszt's home tutor, Gort was appointed by the Count to follow Liszt to the Flower Town after the enfeoffment system. What he wanted was the position of advisor. After all, no matter how nice the home tutor sounded, it couldn't change the fact that he was a servant. The same was true for Marcus. He was also a home tutor, but his identity was still a retainer knight, belonging to the servant sequence. Even though Gort was an aristocrat, albeit the lowest rank of chevalier knight, he wasn't even an aristocrat. He was just one of the better commoners. Sir, you want to confer the position of Flower Town's advisor on me? Gort still couldn't believe it. He had been here for half a year, yet Liszt had never mentioned the position of advisor. He was about to give up. He didn't expect good news to fall from the sky. Caught off guard, he was appointed as an advisor. What's wrong? Is Teacher Gort not willing to take the position? I am willing, of course I am willing. How could I not be willing, haha. Gort was in high spirits, beaming with joy. I am ready to serve sir at any time. In governing the Flower Town, I must do what I preach. I will definitely live up to my duties as an advisor, and will not slack off in the slightest. Liszt said, I have seen your recent work attitude. You are my home tutor, so I trust you. The flower town is my only fief and also the foundation of my fight for glory. Its importance is self-evident. I hope that you can take it seriously." Gort put away his bright smile, put his left hand on his chest, and solemnly performed a knight's salute. "As you wish. I will leave the flower town to you, my adviser. I am willing to serve, sir." There was no grand appointment ceremony. The flower town was just a small rural town. Just like that, an advisor equivalent to the town's mayor was selected. Strictly speaking, being an advisor sounded better than being an administrative officer at most. Gort's real power did not increase by much. An advisor could appoint the town's officials. It sounded like he had great power, but the castle was just next door. No official appointment could avoid List. However, their income had greatly increased. His salary, which used to be 10 copper coins a day, was increased to 20 copper coins a day. With a higher income, he would be able to buy a lot of extra wine or some furniture for his and Frage's small family. "Congratulations, Lord Advisor." Isaiah and the others congratulated Gort. Gort was in high spirits, laughing incessantly. "For Sir Baron List, for the grace of the night, and for the future of all of us, let us make Flower Town more prosperous and prosperous." People are in high spirits when faced with happy events. Over the next 2 days, Gort, who was acting as a consultant, devoted himself to his work with great enthusiasm. In addition to managing specific affairs, he did not forget List's instructions to make an overall arrangement for the future planning of the flower town. To this end, he made a request at the dinner party. "Sir, I am going to carry out another census of the town. No, it should be called a census of the town's resources. First of all, the farmland area should be calculated and the agricultural structure of the flower town should be planned. When the 500 serfs arrive, the serfs can be quickly arranged to farm. Secondly, investigate the caravan's merchandise sales and reasonably arrange craftsmen to run the shop." He waved a small fork, disregarding aristocratic etiquette, and said passionately, "There will be more and more caravans coming and going from the town. The flower caravan and the thorns caravan can sell the town's product. Our commercial district will soon prosper and bring a lot of gold coins to the castle." "Very good idea. Advisor Gort, make this plan in more detail, and then let me have a look." "Yes, sir." Outside the town's administrative office, Costo was pacing back and forth. From time to time, civilians passing by would greet him, and he would respond one by one. Costo was now a celebrity in the town. The source of his fame was not because he was the first captain of the flower town's first ship, the Flower, but because of his tireless attitude of seeking. Almost every family's young son had been roped in by him. "Young man, you have a lot of ideas. Learn sailing from me." Even those young bachelors had been roped in by him. "There are more men than women in the flower town. You can't get a wife. It is better to learn sailing from me. There are countless women in the outside world. After a trip, you can marry a hard-working and capable woman with a big ass and give birth to many sons for you." Most people scoffed at Costo's roping in. The mainland complex, brought by the aristocracy, made the narrow-minded commoners have a natural fear and ignorance of the sea. Therefore, after countless setbacks, Costo only roped in 10 bachelors and 12 teenagers to learn sailing from him and become apprentice sailors. Moreover, this was free teaching. If he were to collect tuition fees, it was estimated that no one would come. He also had to subsidize a few tons of lunches from time to time. If it wasn't for the fixed salary paid by the Sir Lord to teach the night squad, he wouldn't even be able to get a single apprentice. Costo was not discouraged by his yearning for the sea. He was still enthusiastic to train apprentice sailors of varying ages. But for the past 2 days, none of the apprentice sailors had come. Costo was anxious. Clop, clop, clop. The horses' hooves made a crisp sound as they stepped on the gravel road. He immediately went to greet them. The town's consultant had returned. "Sir Consultant." Oh, it's Captain Costo. What's the matter? Gort looked travel-worn, and his face was a little purple from the sun. My apprentices have all gone to cut down trees. Sir Consultant, they need to learn sailing instead of being transferred to do insignificant things like cutting down trees. I'm sorry, Costo. Cutting down trees is not an insignificant matter. Sir Lord personally instructed me to do this. It is related to the future development of the entire flower town. Your sailing career can wait a few days. In any case, you don't need to go to sea. Just give yourself a vacation. I don't have the time to take a vacation even if I wanted to. Gort didn't attach much importance to Costo. He just wanted to send him away. The town couldn't even farm, so how could it have the leisure to go sailing? However, he underestimated Costo's determination. After saying that Sir Lord wants to develop the sailing career, Costo followed Gort. Wherever Gort went, he would go, even if Gort went home. Gort had no choice but to agree. I can transfer 12 of your apprentice sailors to continue learning sailing from you. However, the adult apprentices must cut down trees. All right. Costo hurriedly responded. He was already satisfied that he could get 12 apprentice sailors. There is one more thing. If the youngsters help at the tree-cutting site, they will get a copper coin for 2 days. You will have to pay for this loss. Oh heavens, I don't have any money. Don't tell me you don't want the youngsters to earn money? Their parents will teach you how to be a man, Costo. The sailing career is for Sir Lord's glory. Do you want the town to just stand by and watch? The town should pay for this. After another round of shameless wrangling, Gort finally agreed that the town would subsidize the apprentices' lost wages during the logging war. Only then did Costo board the flower, satisfied. Chapter 135. Ready, ready, change sails with the wind. Tighten the rope. Let's go downwind. Prepare to lower the sails. Paddle room, paddle on the left. Raise the foresail. On the slightly undulating sea, the flower slowly sailed with the current, stopping from time to time, making a circle or turning a corner. Captain Costo's voice, which came with a loudspeaker effect, constantly sounded throughout the ship, giving various orders. The 12 sailors were in a flurry to control the ship. According to the size and tonnage of the flower, 12 sailors were simply not enough to operate the ship. The full complement was 30 sailors. The work of 30 people was done by 12 teenagers, and they were all newcomers. The pressure could be imagined. The flower's sailing was also intermittent, always unable to sail steadily to the target. But no matter what, under Costo's command and guidance, the flower still stuck to the seaside, sailing to the northern pier area. Half a day later, the teaching and learning voyage smoothly arrived at the destination. It was a rocky beach. The flower anchored in the bay for a short time as lunchtime, and also to train the sailors in swimming lessons. The coastal area is not like what people say, where sea monsters eat people. This is not the living area of sea monsters. Sea monsters live in the deep sea, and sailing offshore will basically not encounter sea monsters. Of course, if you are unlucky and bask in the sun on the shore, a sea monster will crawl over and eat you. Costo tried to dispel the apprentice sailor's fear of deep water, but his words were obviously not up to standard. The apprentice sailors were even more afraid to go into the water. Swimming on the beach could make them nervous for a long time, let alone here in the deep water bay. "Captain, we already know how to swim," an apprentice sailor argued in a low voice. "Can deep water and shallow water be the same? Absolutely not. You have to overcome your fear of the blue water. It will save your life at a critical moment." "How can that be? We are on the ship, we will never run into the water for no reason." "Idiot. When sailing in the sea, the waves often roll up the sailors and they fall into the sea. If you don't know how to swim, you won't even have time to be rescued." "That, Captain, I just came to be an apprentice sailor. I have no intention of going to sea. If I don't have this plan, Then why are you learning sailing? Do you think that I, Costo, am easy to fool? Costo flew into a rage. He pointed at the apprentice sailor's nose and roared, I am the captain of the Flower appointed by Sir Lord. In the future, I will go out to sea to trade for Sir Lord. You will be the first batch of sailors. You can fool me, but do you dare to fool Sir Lord? The apprentice sailors were all submissive. He suddenly felt as though he had boarded a pirate ship. Costo gave up on persuading him with kind words and directly threatened, I have been authorized by Sir Lord to take full responsibility for the navigation matters. The Flower Town's Sir Advisor also has to cooperate with me. Remember, whoever dares to escape or go against my orders, I will hand you over to Lord Carl's patrol team. Hearing the name of the patrol team, the youths became even more timid. Sir Lord was indeed noble and inviolable, but it was said that Sir Lord was the embodiment of benevolence. They were not afraid, only reverent. But the patrol team was famous. Liszt had always wanted to build the patrol team into a police station where the police and the people were like one family. Unfortunately, there was no hope. The existence of flogging and other corporal punishments was bound to make people fearful. Carl meticulously implemented the rules in return for the Lord's trust in him. Any commoner who made a mistake would be directly whipped. Not a single whip would be spared. This caused everyone to pale at the mention of the patrol team. Costo was very satisfied when he saw the youth's expressions. After brandishing the stick, he turned to brandishing the carrot. Don't be afraid of the sea. The sea is the same as the land. If we can farm on land, then we can sail on the sea. Going out to sea is the best decision for you. There is endless wealth overseas, as well as women with big breasts and big buttocks. Is there really a woman with a big buttocks? A youth overcame his fear and swallowed. Of course. I once went to an island where the war had just ended. The women stood in a row and everyone chose. I chose the woman with the biggest buttocks, said Costo in a nostalgic tone. And then, Captain? And then? Yes, Captain. And then you and the big buttocks? And then? Costo licked his lip. And then I gave her 3 copper coins. In fact, she only needed 2 copper coins to spend a comfortable night, but I gave her an extra copper coin. That towering mountain gave me an unparalleled experience. I swear, it can suffocate your head inside. Costo drew a circle with his hand. A very large circle. It was so huge that the youths were dumbfounded. Gulp, gulp. The youths swallowed. All right, the break is over. It's time for class, lads. If you want a woman with a big body, then you have to learn according to my requirement. When you become qualified sailors, you can still spend 2 copper coins to spend a wonderful night. Now, dive, swim. The youths immediately overcame their fear. They howled and jumped into the sea. Costo took out a wooden wine pot from his bosom, unplugged it, and took a sip. He understood what these youths wanted. After all, he was also young. After drinking a mouthful of wine, he returned to the captain's cabin and carefully took out a 1-meter-long cylinder from a box. This was the telescope that the Sir Lord had sent a servant to deliver yesterday. The Sir Lord had assigned his telescope to the Flowers. It was this telescope that allowed him to understand the Sir Lord's views on sailing. He longs for the sea more than any other aristocrat. Costo felt that his future was bright. An aristocrat who yearned for the sea would undoubtedly support his sailing. It was precisely because of this that he had the confidence to go to the administrative office and pester Advisor Gort to fight for benefits. Holding the telescope, he went to the deck. For him, the swaying deck was more stable than land. He picked up the telescope and began to look into the distance. The distant scenery seemed to suddenly appear in front of him. It was a wonderful transformation. It felt incredible. Only a noble aristocrat like the Sir Lord can make such an incredible object. He looked at the sea level in the distance, then looked at the thick smoke of the distant Thorns Ridge, then looked at the several seabirds walking on the rocky beach, and then looked at the steep rocky mountain on the shore. Suddenly, he frowned slightly and saw that there seemed to be a cave on the rocky mountain that had been washed by the sea. A cave? The mountain here isn't high, so there should be a cave. What kind of cave could it be? There seems to be a seabird flying out of the cave just now. Could there be a sea poison? The sea poison was a gull-type seabird that nested on the cliffs by the sea. Its eggs were very popular among the aristocrats. Some aristocrats would even arrange for serfs to risk their lives to collect sea poison eggs. Chapter 136. For the Hellion Egg. Costa waited for the teenagers to finish their swimming lesson and immediately set off. He started the flower and stumbled towards the cave over there. Not far from the cave, he could clearly see the appearance of the cave. It was not big, after all, the mountain was not high, and the flat cave entrance was like a big mouth. It was not deep inside, and he could clearly see the situation inside at a glance. In particular, Costa could see more clearly with his binoculars. Oh heavens! There are actually bones. He saw several human skeletons lying in the cave. There were also some broken things, and even the wreckage of a small boat. "Drop anchor! Release the canoe!" he roared, ready to disembark and row the canoe over to see what was going on inside the cave. The castle. In the nearby black nightshade field. Liszt was inspecting his black nightshade. "It is about to be born, Mr. Carter, my 9th sprite worm." Liszt stroked the big budding flower and released magic eyes. He could clearly see light blue magic power converging from all over the black nightshade's branches and leaves towards the special flower, giving birth to the black nightshade sprite worm. "It's really a night's glory. We all thought it was impossible to survive, but it stubbornly survived. Master, Mr. Gort said that you are a son of glory, and I firmly believe it. It is your glory that shines on the black nightshade sprite worm. Perhaps I am indeed very lucky. The title of Son of Glory, like the literati star descends to the world back on earth, was a conforming title. Liszt did not know whether he was a son of glory or some other kind of son. The smoke mission brought him far more luck than ordinary people, which was probably the night's glory. He did not dwell too much on this point. He just said indifferently, "Be sure to take care of it often, and inform me as soon as the black nightshade sprite worm is born." "Please rest assured, the castle's valet will come to check on the black nightshade every hour except at night," Carter replied. "By the way, is it time for Stupid Woman to feed?" "It was almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon when we set out, so it is indeed time to feed." "Then let's go back first." Returning to the castle, Zhang Xian led Dosen along with the servants to feed him water. Stupid Woman's iron cage has been custom-made and placed 500 meters away from the castle. With the iron cage as the center, the foundation is being excavated 20 meters around, and a 3-meter-high wall will be built. The top of the wall will also be equipped with a sloping baffle to prevent Stupid Woman from escaping. But now Stupid Woman has not eaten for 3 days. She could only wait for Liszt to be present to monitor its condition and ask the servants to feed it some water to prevent it from dying of thirst. "Woo!" Seeing someone coming, Stupid Woman, who was lying on the ground, climbed up softly and stared fiercely at Liszt and his party. Its ferocious nature had obviously not diminished by much. "Woof woof!" Dosen rushed over and circled around the cage, wagging his tail and barking at Stupid Woman enthusiastically. Stupid Woman, however, had no enthusiasm for it. She stared back at Dosen and continued to growl in a low voice. "The feeding device hasn't been delivered yet?" Liszt glanced at the cage and asked Thomas, who was following behind him. "Even the stakes have not been placed. It's too slow." The feeding device was a feeding device specially designed for Stupid Woman. After all, Stupid Woman was not Dosen, who could hurt people at any time. To prevent this, she was kept in a cage. But after all, she had to be fed, and it was impossible to starve her to death. Therefore, a feeding device was designed. From the outside of the fence, a rope was used to slide and feed into the iron cage. At the same time, the iron cage could be pulled. Once the feces in the cage accumulated too much, the cage and stupid woman would be pulled away, and the ground would be cleaned and then pulled back. It's complicated. In fact, it's very simple, just a simple application of a few ropes. For the sake of his future army of flying dust dogs, Liszt carefully designed it. It has no magic at all. It turns out that even World of Warcraft can't condense magic when it's hungry. Liszt thought. In World of Warcraft, half of the magic is produced by the body and the other half is absorbed from the outside world. However, in a starving state, not only can the body not produce magic, but it also has no strength to absorb magic from the outside world. This shows the importance of nutrition for cultivation. Thomas, feed it water. Yes, master. Thomas carefully carried the bucket and moved to the side of the violent dog's iron cage. Even though he had fed it several times, his hands and feet still trembled. Woo! Stupid woman increased the volume of her low growl at him. Thomas's hands shook so much that he spilled half of the water he scooped. When he reached for the cage to pour water, stupid woman poked her head over again. This time, the water was completely spilled. He bowed his head and hurriedly apologized. I'm sorry, master. Continue to feed it. Stupid woman can no longer release magic. She is only equivalent to a wild dog, remember that. Yes, master. The second time, with preparation, Thomas finally poured the water into the basin. Stupid woman growled for a while, but when she saw that she could not scare Thomas, she began to drink. By the time stupid woman finished drinking, Dosen was already anxiously walking around outside. It had eaten its fill. Liszt coughed and said, Thomas, push the iron cage over there. There were 2 iron cages, one for stupid woman to live in and the other to send Dosen in. For fear that stupid woman would run out, the iron cages would be joined together and the cage door would be opened. Because it had been done once yesterday, Dosen cooperatively got into the small iron cage and was pushed to the door of the large cage by Thomas and the other servants. Pulling out the iron door of the cage, the 2 cages were suddenly connected. Dosen quickly rushed in, threw himself on stupid woman and began to shake vigorously. Stupid woman, who had been hungry for 3 days, was powerless to resist. Half an hour later, it was all over. Only stupid woman was left lying in the cage, her eyes closed, staring blankly at the sky that was divided into squares. There were white clouds floating freely in the sky. On the other side, Dosen was in high spirits, wantonly playing on the horse field. He had a good time every day. His body was stronger, and this kind of strength could be felt every day. His muscles were not as swollen as they were at the beginning, and he gradually returned to the normal figure of a flying dust dog, a little fat and streamlined. But his current length and height had definitely surpassed that of an adult tiger. His magic was also rising, and he could already release rockthorns 45 times a day. Liszt increasingly felt that Dosen might really have a chance to evolve to the intermediate world of Warcraft. So the food given to him was getting better and better. Almost every meal was World of Warcraft meat, which was equivalent to feeding Dosen with gold coins. Dosen's daily food intake was probably more than 7 lists. At least 1 gold coin a day, Dosen, you can't let me down. Liszt said to himself, and then ordered, Dosen, release magic. Woof. Dosen, who was running, barked subconsciously and then released magic. Poochie! Poochie! 2 rockthorns pierced the ground in front of him at the same time. 2 rockthorns released at the same time? Liszt saw it and was very surprised. Releasing 2 magic at the same time was equivalent to a new kind of magic. Only intermediate World of Warcraft could release multiple magic. Chapter 137. Treasure. Liszt became excited when he heard it. He immediately summoned Casto, who was waiting in the castle. What treasure? Sir Lord, it is a nautical route to an island. During the trial voyage of the flower, I found a cave not far from the pier. There were human corpses inside. After inspection, it was found that a group of rats were trapped in the cave and died. Before they died, they left behind the location of the horse trade, which was on that island. Horse dealers? List quickly thought of the smoke mission, a traces of black dragon horses. He gave up on studying the new spell released by Dosen and immediately said, "Take me to the cave, I want to investigate it myself." While preparing to set off, he took the opportunity to summon the smoke mission. He found that the smoke mission had changed. Mission completed. Reward: traces of black dragon horses. Mission: World of Warcraft has been cleaned up. The Flower Town has never been so safe. As the Lord, it is time to go all out and achieve leapfrog development for the Flower Town. What harm is there in destroying the environment? Please flatten the thorns forest. Reward: a variant type of thorns. World of Warcraft had been cleaned up. The Thorns Sprite Worm Chain mission had also been restarted. List felt that today was a festive day. He was just short of magpies chirping on the branches. Soon, he understood how the mission was completed. Retainer Knight Sean brought a dead shadow snake to the castle. The shadow snake bit 3 serfs to death. The logging site was very chaotic. However, under the suppression of Sir Marcus, Consultant Gort, and other the serfs went back to logging work. Sean reported the scene at the time. The burning bonfire did not scare away the shadow snake. It attacked 3 serfs in succession and was eventually killed by Marcus with a bow and arrow. Afterward, the serfs panicked. Although they were suppressed, their work efficiency inevitably fluctuated. Sean, tell teacher Marcus to continue to strengthen the protection of the logging team. Although the World of Warcraft had been wiped out, List could not tell others clearly and could only continue to strengthen the protection. In addition, tell Consultant Gort that each family of a dead serf will be given a gold coin. At this time, gold coins were the best way to comfort and stimulate the serfs to work harder. It was more convincing than any threats or encouraging words. Yes, sir. Shaoen accepted the order and left. List put on his World of Warcraft leather armor and brought along his valet Thomas, as well as Rome Winebarrel, who had been notified to act as a squire. How could a lord not have a squire when he went out? Sir Lord, we can actually reach the cave by land, but we need to cross the mountain ridge and climb a steep cliff. Taking the flower is the most convenient. Costo bowed to List and began to direct the flowers to set sail. The anchor was pulled, the oars were rowed, and the sails were raised. They changed direction and slowly sailed on the sea. After a voyage, the young sailors performed well. Their speed was much faster than before, and it only took them about 20 minutes to reach the vicinity of the cave. After putting down the canoe, Costo led List and the others into the cave. The cave was very damp and was almost level with the high tide, so from time to time, the waves would push in seawater. However, the deeper part of the cave was dry. It was afternoon, and the sun had already set over the mountain ridge. The sunlight no longer shone in, making the cave somewhat dark. Thomas lit the candles he had prepared earlier to increase the light in the cave. Sir Lord, there is the wreckage of a small boat here. Looking at its shape, it should be a small boat carried by a large ship. After being continuously washed by the sea, only a little wooden plank is left. Costo turned the wreckage over. The wreckage broke into pieces and scattered sawdust on the ground. Then, he went to a few sets of bones. There are a total of 3 human corpses. I have examined them, and they are in good condition without losing too many bones. They carried weapons, bone swords. The bones are very hard, but they are not in the shape of a knight sword, so they should be a group of rats. Knight, as the name suggests, was a warrior on horseback. Knight was the main force of war, the composition of the army. The war between lords was the charge between knight. However, not all people who cultivated chi chose to become a knight. Knight was a product of the aristocratic system, and there were still some people who chose to dissociate from the aristocratic system. These people were smugglers, marginal people, and despicable people. They did not obey the management of the Lord, did not work in production, and were free and undisciplined. They engaged in industries that violated the aristocratic system, such as theft, robbery, smuggling, pimping, or accepting employment to carry out assassinations, slave trading, and so on. These people were naturally called rats, but they called themselves rangers. Rats. Liszt was not very moved. He was no stranger to rats. He and Levis cooperated in the slave trade, so they had to cooperate with rats. The aristocrats denounced and belittled this group of people as rats, but it did not prevent them from cooperating with rats. After all, it was not convenient for the aristocrats to do many dirty things themselves, so they needed rats to do it. The pirates that appeared in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire were also rats. They were basically aristocrats in disguise. Rats were another skin of the aristocrats. Ordinary people did not have so much nutrition to cultivate qi, only the aristocrats could raise rats. Liszt believed that the Tulip family also had their own rat. As the second son of the Count, he had no right to know. Are there any more things that show their identity preserved? Liszt picked up a bone sword and asked. This bone sword should be made from the bones of World of Warcraft. It was curved, completely different from the long and straight knight sword. It was more suitable for close combat. After a long period of natural corrosion, the bone sword had no traces of magic. Their clothes and parcels have long since decayed. The humidity here is very high, so it is impossible to preserve them. Only these serpentines engraved on the walls remain. Costo pointed to the cave wall and said. Thomas moved the candle lamp closer. It illuminated the serpentines on the cave wall. The serpentines were already blurred, divided into two large sections, and only part of them could be recognized. I was seriously injured and about to die. Swite was a mole, an informant. The green light sank the ship and took away the horse. But he underestimated me and killed me. I couldn't walk out of the steep cliff. The horse, the letter on its back you can rush over. A nautical chart of the island. My family tell Molly that I love her. Caspar Iron. The was a single serpentine character that could not be seen clearly, while the was an entire paragraph of serpentine that could not be seen clearly. He could barely guess the contents of these two paragraphs. After pondering for a moment, Liszt figured out the gist of it. There was a mole among the horse dealers, who seemed to be called Swite. He sank the ship and wanted to take away the horse. In the end, Caspar was killed, but he was seriously injured. Before he died, he sent away the horse and tied a letter on its back. Then he left the nautical chart. Comparing it with the reward given by the smoke mission, Liszt already understood. Obviously, this group of rats found the island where Black Dragon lived. They should be rats working for the Tulip family. My Black Dragon is the horse that was sent away by Caspar. Thinking of this, his gaze couldn't help but turn to the nautical chart next to the serpentines. Chapter 138. He understood the meaning of the treasure. Liszt suppressed his excitement and asked flatly, Captain Costo, can you understand this nautical chart? Sir Lord, this nautical chart is a general nautical chart with not too complicated content. It should be that the mouse itself is not proficient in sailing, so I can completely understand the route on the nautical chart. Costo said confidently. The seemingly distorted and abstract nautical chart with strange symbols was not difficult for him at all. So, is the island where the horse lives far from Coral Island? Judging from the nautical chart, the island is 130 kilometers north of Coral Island. With the Flower's speed of 5 knots, it would take about 14 hours to sail to Horse Island without encountering ocean currents and storms. Costo calculated with his fingers and replied. Liszt's mathematics was not bad. According to Costo's introduction, He estimated that the speed of one knot was less than 2 kilometers per hour. The speed of the flower was about 9 kilometers per hour. It was not as fast as riding a bicycle. He vaguely remembered that the narrowest part of the Taiwan Strait seemed to be only 135 kilometers. In other words, the distance between Coral Island and Horse Island was separated by the Taiwan Strait. Captain Costo, when can the flower set sail for Horse Island? Sir Lord, if it's just going to sea, the apprentice sailors are already competent. After all, Horse Island is not very far away and belongs to the offshore sailing range. However, the sailors are too inexperienced. Once they encounter a storm, they will not be able to deal with it, and the probability of an accident is great. If we go all out to train, how long will it take before we can go to sea? If Sir Lord can let me recruit 30 apprentice sailors and have them train every day, then within a month, I can make the flower set sail to Horse Island. Liszt made a decision in an instant. I will let Advisor Gort fully cooperate with you. 1 month later, we will set sail to Horse Island. Give the island a name, Black Horse Island. Costo said excitedly. I am willing to serve Sir Lord. Imprint this nautical chart and then erase the picture on the cave wall. After this was done, the flower returned. At night, it had become a custom to summarize the day's work at the castle's dinner party. Liszt was not a stingy lord. He did not mind his subordinates freeloading in the castle. This was also a way to rope in people. Sir, if the clues left by the rats are true, we must control Black Horse Island as soon as possible to prevent it from being occupied by other forces. Then, as soon as possible to obtain military merits, get enfeoffment, and make Black Horse Island a fief of the Lord. War horses are more important than any other resource, Marcus said solemnly. Since there were many uninhabited islands in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, the lord who had rendered meritorious service could designate an uninhabited island as his fief. Before he was enfeoffed, all the uninhabited islands in the Azure Waves Sea belonged to the Sapphire Grand Duke in theory. He could choose to operate it secretly. This was an unspoken rule. Once the Grand Duke chose an uninhabited island as a fief to enfeoff to a certain lord, he must immediately give it up. However, it was rare to see someone secretly managing a deserted island. Firstly, the nobles did not lack land for farming. What they lacked were elves and metals. Secondly, it was difficult to guarantee that the news of the island's management would not be leaked. Once the business reached a certain level, it was inevitable that the Grand Duke would forcefully enfeoff the island. In theory, all the products on the island would be transferred to another lord. Therefore, it was not worth it to sneak into a deserted island. For example, the Tulip family had reclaimed the Coral Island for 20 years, yet 1/3 of the land was still uncultivated wasteland. Before Liszt came to Flower Town, a large part of it was also uncultivated. As of now, there were still many places that were uncultivated, not to mention the Thorns Ridge that was yet to be developed. The news must be blocked, and all those who know the news must be given a serious warning. Otherwise, Black Horse Island will inevitably be seized by other lords, Gort said in an equally serious tone. He and Marcus were well aware of the importance of warhorses to the aristocracy, especially warhorses with excellent bloodlines like Black Dragon. On the battlefield, it played a vital supporting role for the knight's strength. It could be said very intuitively. When charging on the battlefield, an elite Earth Knight riding a horse might not necessarily be able to beat an ordinary Earth Knight riding Black Dragon. Then, the news is limited to everyone here, as well as Costo, Rome, and my manservant Thomas. Liszt readily accepted the advice. When the sailors finish their training, they and their families will move directly to Black Horse Island to live. Of course, first of all, we have to see what kind of environment Black Horse Island is. Gort said optimistically, Black Horse Island, which can raise a horse like Black Dragon, must be a flat green island. I think it must be large enough to accommodate an earl. Liszt cut a piece of World of Warcraft meat, swallowed it, and said casually, "No matter how big it is destined to be my island. Advisor Gort, you have to actively cooperate with Costo on the training of sailors. Try to satisfy him as much as you can." "I understand." The Black Dragon horses of Black Horse Island began to secretly prepare for the attack. The logging team was still working with great fanfare. Hundreds of people were collectively cutting down trees. Limited by tools, individual efficiency may not be high, but overall progress was very fast. In just 5 days, about a third of the trees in the northern Thorns Ridge had been cut down. A large area of thorns around the pier had been cut down, leaving only a few wild fruit trees. It would take about half a month to complete the new smoke mission, so it was useless to be anxious. Since Gort became an advisor, his enthusiasm for work had soared and he had taken too much initiative, causing List to have nothing to do most of the time. Therefore, domesticating Blessed Curls became his current research topic. Blessed Curl's feathers gradually hardened, and the magic power in its body gradually became abundant. If it wasn't for the chains on its feet, it would have learned to fly. "Old Grandette, on such a large coral island, you really can't find even a single eagle tamer?" "Sir Lord, I have asked the people of the flower caravan to inquire in various cities, and even small towns. There are indeed no craftsmen who can domesticate eagles. Old Grandette, the captain of the flower caravan who came to the castle to report, replied. Continue to inquire." "Yes, Sir Lord." After sending Old Grandette away, List rubbed his forehead. Although Blessed Curl's quack and quack sounds were very annoying, it was, after all, a World of Warcraft that had been raised since childhood. It would be a pity to kill it and eat its meat. However, List didn't worry about Blessed Curls for too long. The servant who took care of the Black Nightshade returned to report the good news. "Master, the Black Nightshade sprite worm has been born." Quickly rushing to the Black Nightshade field, List saw a black and shiny Black Nightshade sprite worm, which looked like a black gem. It was very interesting. With a simple lure of jade powder, the Black Nightshade sprite bit List's finger, successfully forming a contract. His 9th sprite worm had finally moved into the castle. Chapter 139. The arrival of the serfs made the fief's officials very excited. There was a shortage of manpower at the moment. List was also ready to go to the Coral City to hand over the 500 serf. Although the weather at the end of summer and the beginning of autumn was still a bit hot, the sun was not so scorching. Wearing the symbol of aristocracy, he could still endure it. Now, he no longer had to ride a horse. The castle had just purchased a brand new 4-wheeled carriage. The servants carefully decorated it, inserted a flag on the roof, embroidered with a purple-black tulip. The tulip family had their own flag, which was a bright red tulip. It was the family's first tulip worm, a tulip species. Unfortunately, the tulip worm only evolved into a sprite before dying of old age. The current tulip sprites were bred from the tulip magic ingredient. List was no longer an official member of the tulip family, so the red tulip flag was no longer suitable to be used. He chose the black tulip as his flag. The flags of the Flower Caravan and the Thorns Caravan were all black tulip. On the Coral Island, this was probably already familiar to everyone. When they saw the black tulip flag, they understood that it was the Count's third son, the Baron of the Flower Town, List, who had recently been in the limelight. Black Tulip. This was the name of the brand new carriage. The coachman was One-Eyed Barton. There were not many horses, so his workload was very light. He could also go to the Coral City to see the world. "Master, according to your instructions, I picked the healthiest Black Nightshade, dug it out along with the soil, and put it in a pot. You see, its fruits are cyan, and there are also ripe black ones. The old lady will definitely like it." "Very good, water it and put it in the carriage." List gestured. The Black Nightshade worm originated from the Black Nightshade raised by Madame Penelope. Therefore, Liszt got a pot of black nightshade for the old lady. Courtesy demanded reciprocity. At the same time, he could also show off his abilities. Who asked this old lady to always dislike him? Just because he was a little handsome. Master, are you going to take Dosen with you? Take Dosen around. He is now my loyal guard. The Earth Knight is no match for him. Liszt said proudly. He was very satisfied with Dosen. The bloodline fruit did not go to waste. It could now release a few rock spikes at the same time. At one time, it could release 6 rock spikes at once. Summing up the opinions of Marcus, Gort, and the others, everyone agreed that the current Trembling Woods was a mid-ranked magic beast. Trembling Woods might be relatively weak among mid-ranked magic beasts, especially when compared to the purple sand crocodile that could crush the Coral Island Knights, but it could only be regarded as a rookie. But intermediate World of Warcraft was intermediate of Warcraft. It went beyond the shackles of low-level World of Warcraft and could release 2 kinds of magic, rock thorns and multiple rock thorns. Moreover, it still had room to grow. At the very most, it was only 7 months old. Maybe after a period of growth, it would understand more magic. With Dosen, he could basically walk sideways on Coral Island. Carter looked at the majestic Dosen and said with a smile, "It's good to take it away so it doesn't always revolve around Stupid Woman." Mr. Marcus said that Stupid Woman is almost pregnant. They are not suitable to mate together again. Indeed, Dosen is growing now. It can't be empty. Liszt said seriously. In addition, for Stupid Woman, from now on, nutrition should be provided. If it is determined that she is not pregnant, then cut off the supply and wear down her fierceness. This is necessary. After being hungry for so many days in a row, she could only eat once in a while, and after eating, she would be raped by Dosen. Stupid Woman's life was quite painful, and her fierceness was worn down little by little. Seeing the arrival of Liszt and others, she no longer chose to roar, only fear remained. No matter how clever World of Warcraft was, it was only a kind of beast. The method of boiling a frog in warm water could make Stupid Woman fear Liszt and others. Even if she regained her strength in the future, she would not dare to resist Liszt and others. Just like a lion in a circus, it was whipped by the keeper since childhood. It dared neither escape nor resist, and it had no demeanor of a king of beasts. In view of Stupid Woman's quick attitude, Liszt got a lot of inspiration. He gradually had a vague idea and was ready to use it on Blessed Curls. This winged peregrine falcon was getting fatter and fatter. It was time to suffer a little. The clothes were put on and the carriage was ready. Gort also rushed over with Isaiah, Blair, and Rome Winebarrel. They were accompanied by several clerks who were going to receive the serfs together. At the same time, Marcus also rushed over. "My lord, don't you need the night squad to follow?" "No, Teacher Marcus, the logging team's work is equally important." It was a simple farewell. The convoy set off. Despite having the strong physique of an Earth Knight, Liszt still felt much more comfortable in a carriage than on a horse. The windows on all sides were open, and the wind blew all the way. The jolting and shaking of the carriage almost made him fall asleep. During this period, Dosen also wanted to get on the carriage to feel comfortable, but Liszt kicked him off. A dog doesn't run with the wheels of a carriage, but wants to ride? Outrageous. In fact, the main reason was that Dosen was too big. When he got into the carriage, Liszt was squeezed so much that he had no place to stretch his legs. Moreover, his weight was close to 800 kilograms. When he got on the carriage, the 2 horses pulling the carriage were tired and panting. After leaving the Thorns Ridge Road, they entered the common dirt road of Coral Island. It was very dusty. After running with the convoy for a while, Dosen turned into dust. Liszt hurriedly put on his mask and pulled down the curtains of the windows. At around 10 o'clock in the morning, the convoy smoothly arrived at Coral City. Advisor Gort, take Blair and Isaiah to discuss the handover with Mr. Frank. I will first visit my grandmother. As you wish, my lord. Separated at this point, the carriage continued towards the independent small castle at the edge of Coral City. When the servants in the castle saw the black tulip flag fluttering on the carriage, they understood who had arrived. The butler quickly led the servants out to welcome them. Young Master List, I am so happy to see you. Where is grandmother? The old madam is in the castle, chatting with Miss Olvera. Earlier today, Miss Olvera came to the castle to accompany the old madam. Elder sister also came. List was not surprised, because he saw a carriage with a flag with a special design parked at the castle gate. It was Olvera's carriage. The design of the flag was of her own design. It was said to be an abstract combination of a hot spring, a bird, a tulip, and a dame, but List really couldn't see it. As he entered the castle, he said to the serving man Tom, "Take good care of Dosen, don't let it hurt people." "Understood, master." Tom looked a little nervous while holding Dosen's leash. Taking care of Dosen before was Thomas's job. Today, Thomas had to follow List closely, so Dosen fell on his head. His strength couldn't restrain Dosen, so he could only barely maintain it. Fortunately, Dosen had been trained to be very obedient. As long as List didn't let it wander, it wouldn't wander. Chapter 140. Grandmother, you have a pair of eyes that can see through everything. List smiled. The shady dealings between him and Levis were not particularly hidden, and it was not difficult for people to find out. At least the Count knew about their slave trading plan. As long as the Count wanted to know about Coral Island, he could find out at any time. Olvera looked at the increasingly outstanding List and was very dissatisfied. "List, the flower caravan's seafood business has reached my Falcon Town. Then I must congratulate Big Sister. The citizens of Falcon Town will be able to eat delicious seafood. I will organize my people to fish for seafood. Although you and Levis have monopolized the seafood market, the other lords will also organize their people to fish for seafood. Your good business will not last long." List sat in a chair, not minding Olvera's provocation. The seaside towns, of course, can fish for seafood on their own. They have the right to do so. But Coral Island is so big, not every town is next to the sea, and not every beach is rich in seafood. In fact, the flower caravan no longer had to work hard to catch seafood. They directly cooperated with the lord of the seaside town, letting the town lord catch seafood, and then the flower caravan would buy it and sell it to the city. Each town had different seafood specialties. The flower caravan had the most complete variety of seafood, which could be bought at a low price and sold at a high price. When the aristocrats and civilians of Coral Island gradually got used to the seafood on the table, the income had risen from the original estimate of 3 gold coins a day to 4 gold coins a day. Excluding the dividends paid to Levis and the consumption of the caravan, they earned more than 3 gold coins a day. With the seafood market, List was enough to join the ranks of Coral Island's rich. This was a windfall that made people jealous. Olvera was jealous, but she also understood that List had the confidence. He had already fed Levis. On the Coral Island, the words of 2 people were the most useful, the Count and Levis. The Count was Levis's father, so he obviously would not rob his son's business. Levis also got a share and issued a seafood license. Now, no one could snatch away List's windfall profit. She had no choice but to change the topic. "Why did you come here so early in the morning?" "I'm here to bring flowers to Grandma." List smiled and said to his valet, Thomas, "Go get the potted plants from the carriage." "Yes, master." Not long after, Thomas brought in a pot of nightshade. "So it's a black nightshade." Madame Penelope suddenly understood. "This is the black nightshade I gave you. Did you take good care of it?" "No, it's not the same one I gave you." "Is that black nightshade dead?" "How pitiful, it still couldn't escape the fate of withering." "Grandmother, don't be sad. That black nightshade is still alive and well, and it's very healthy, Much healthier than normal black nightshade. What do you mean? Madame Penelope signaled to her servant to put the black nightshade on the balcony. If you have something to say, just say it. Liszt, don't talk to me with such a tone, it reminds me of Melissa. I have convinced myself that you have the shadow of your father, even though you have Melissa's face. Madame Penelope's resentment towards Melissa was still deep. Liszt had no memory of his mother, nor did he know what kind of tone she used when she was alive. However, he could guess that his words were somewhat deliberately mystifying, or perhaps there was a sense of alienation that was not close enough. This was something that couldn't be helped. After all, he wasn't the original Liszt and couldn't invest too much in it. Therefore, he continued to smile. The black nightshade you gave me wasn't sick, it was just gestating a sprite worm. Now, the black nightshade sprite worm has been born. When the news of the sprite worm came out, Madame Penelope and Elvira were taken aback. Madame Penelope was sincerely happy. She had already forgotten her dissatisfaction with Liszt's deliberately mystifying tone and praised her grandson. Knight, Liszt, you are the luckiest one in the tulip family. Take good care of the black nightshade sprite worm, consider it my gift to you. I am very moved by grandmother's gift. For your birthday this year, I will prepare an elaborate gift for you. Liszt expressed. Seeing that Elvira was about to speak, Liszt, who had no interest in the Chunibu girl, got up. Grandmother, I have an appointment with Mr. Frank, so I won't be staying here any longer. I hope to have lunch in the castle. Go, lucky boy, I will have the kitchen make your favorite omelette. Mr. Frank. Baron Liszt, you look more mature, but you are still as handsome as before. Frank, whose hairline was almost at the top of his head, had an ugly red nose. My Shirley has graduated from Oxhorn Academy and returned. As soon as she came back, she said that she wanted to see Big Brother Liszt. Little Shirley is back? Liszt thought for a while before remembering that little Shirley was Frank's youngest daughter. In his childhood memories, little Shirley was his little attendant. Because they were only 1 year apart, they could play together. But later, Liszt went to Knight Academy, while little Shirley was sent to Oxhorn Academy by Frank, and they never met again. As for Oxhorn Academy, it was located on Iron Hoof Island. Iron Hoof Island was the fief of Marquis Bull. He belonged to the Sapphire Grand Duke, and his ancestor was Sapphire Grand Duke's favorite youngest son. As soon as he came of age, he was conferred the title of Count Bull. After the founding of the country, Iron Hoof Island became his fief, and he was promoted to a marquis. Marquis Bull's family established Oxhorn Academy to train maids for the court. Gradually, aristocrats, big and small, sent their daughters to Oxhorn Academy to study. Aristocratic young ladies with Oxhorn Academy education were very popular among aristocratic marriages. Because these young ladies learned etiquette, needlework, housework, music, reading, writing, and so on, they were considered to be cultured. Of course, not all aristocratic young ladies went to Oxhorn Academy to study. Elvira had never gone there. Liszt didn't know if it was a misconception. Liszt always felt that Frank was always talking about little Shirley, as if he was promoting him. I have probably become a hot young unmarried aristocrat on the island, Liszt thought. However, he didn't have any thoughts about little Shirley. In his memory, little Shirley was a fat girl. After promoting for a while, seeing that Liszt didn't respond enthusiastically, Frank gradually returned to the main topic. Your officials and servants are taking inventory. 500 serfs were gathered in 2s and 3s on an open space not far from the port. Looking at their appearance, most of them looked sick. Liszt didn't know if they were sick or seasick. Gort and others, along with clerks, counted the number of serfs and calculated the ratio of men to women, as well as the number of craftsmen. After a rough count, they quickly returned to Liszt's side. Sir, there are a total of 476 serfs on the side, Frank casually explained. The serfs were transported back from a faraway place, so it was inevitable that some of them would get sick or not acclimatized to the climate. The fleet initially purchased 510 serfs, but lost 34 of them. He sighed in his heart. Liszt nodded in agreement. He knew very well that the sale of serfs was bound to be accompanied by death. Chapter 141. Of the 476 serfs, women accounted for about two-thirds. There were also many infants, children, and elderly people. The number of able-bodied men was very small. In the serf trade market, able-bodied men were regarded as excellent labor force and were much more expensive than the elderly, children, and women. In the eyes of a lord, the quality of these serfs was very poor. Apart from craftsmen, women and children were burdens, and craftsmen were also elderly, which was extremely uneconomical. However, Liszt did not complain in his heart. Women could marry the fief's bachelors to offset the imbalance between men and women in the flower town. Children and infants could be candidates for future knight once they were nurtured. Old craftsmen had superb skills and could cultivate a large number of apprentices. Of course, able-bodied men were equally important to the flower town. Whether it was farming, road repair, or dock repair, they all required able-bodied labor. Therefore, on the surface, Liszt still complained. "Mr. Frank, the quality of these serfs is not very good. I need women by name, so a little more is not a problem. However, there are too many children and the craftsmen are all elderly. Aren't you trying to fool me?" "Oh, Baron Liszt, I dare not fool the Tulip family." Frank laughed. This batch of serfs was gathered by the fleet from the various serf markets. The able-bodied labor force has long been bought by others. You know, without war, there will be no good serfs. So, now that the fleet has set sail again, I should be able to buy good serfs, right? The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom is at war with the Eagle Kingdom. Father and the others have also gone to the battlefield. Frank's eyes moved. You still want to continue the serf trade? Oh yes, the seafood market has brought you a lot of gold coins. Mr. Frank is well aware of the earnings of the seafood market, isn't it? Liszt did not complain about being poor. After all, the other party had been helping Levis collect dividends. I will gather a sum of gold coins as soon as possible. I hope that the fleet can bring me another batch of serfs. There should be no problem. The Tulip fleet always goes to sea to do business. Now that the war has begun, the serf business is easier to do. So, how many serfs are you going to buy? 1,000, including 200 craftsmen. 1,000 serfs, according to the market price, cost 240 gold coins. In the past, the serf business was not good, so I could accept the higher price. But now, during the war, serfs are still so expensive. I can't accept it, Mr. Frank. Regardless of war or not, the serf business is always full of risks. After a round of bargaining, in the end, the price was set at 210 gold coins. Liszt took out the gold coins that he had saved up during this period of time, as well as the money from moving the caravan, and handed them to Frankel. The smile on Liszt's face was no longer as gentle as before. He would have to live in poverty for a period of time, and the feeling of his empty wallet was unbearable, especially after he had gotten used to spending lavishly. He refused Frank's invitation to have lunch with him on the pretext of "Little Shirley really wants to see you." Instead, he had lunch in Madame Penelope's castle. Lady Mary of Tulip Castle also sent a servant to invite him, but he did not go. He was not familiar with Lady Mary. Elvira also stayed here. At the table, she kept asking Liszt, "Your flying dust dog has grown so big, give it to me, how much gold coins do you want?" What an international joke. Although Dosen did not release magic, and others did not know its abilities, they could tell that it was extraordinary just by looking at its body. This could not be measured with gold coins. Liszt responded very coldly. "Dear sister, the first person Dosen sees when it opens its eyes is me, and it recognizes no one but me. Even if you use dragon coins, it will not be recognized. Give up this stupid idea. Hearing the word stupid, Lavera's face became gloomy. You are becoming more and more arrogant. You even dare to disobey your sister's words. With a knife in his left hand and a fork in his right, Liszt calmly cut the steak. I am just telling you a fact, please remain rational. Madame Penelope seemed to appreciate Liszt's current domineering transformation, and she rarely spoke up for him. Lavera, please eat like a lady, don't always think about snatching something from Liszt's hands. If you want, you can choose a suitable husband from among so many outstanding nobles, and he can satisfy everything you want. Grandmother, you don't love me at all now. You have all grown up, my little girls and boys. Grandmother is about to go senile. I only hope that you 3 siblings can live in harmony, take care of Lytton, and let the bloodline of the Tulip family flourish. The lunch was not very harmonious. After the meal, Lavera angrily pulled out her sword and stood in front of Liszt. Fight with me like a warrior, I want to prove that you are still the cowardly Liszt. Not waiting for Liszt to respond, Dosen, who was lying lazily on the side, suddenly broke away from Tom and rushed towards Lavera. His momentum was like a tiger going down the mountain, roaring in a low voice and stirring up a gust of wind. At that moment, cold sweat instantly dripped from Lavera's face. She felt herself being shrouded by a strong murderous intent. It was a kind of murderous intent that could only be experienced in the face of an irresistible force and when one's life was at stake. Just like when she was 7 years old, she used a whip to whip a wild horse, and the wild horse fiercely rushed towards her and opened its mouth to bite her. The difference was that she was now an Earth Knight, and similarly powerless to resist. Come back, Dosen. Liszt gave an indifferent command, and the charging Dosen suddenly braked, no longer rushing forward. But the corium or dog's eyes still flickered with a fierce glint as it fiercely stared at Lavera, as if it would pounce on her at any time and swallow her whole. It is the world of Warcraft of the Thorn's Ridge. Although it has recognized me as its master, its ferocity is not that easy to get rid of. Sorry for scaring you, I still have something to do, I have an appointment. Dear sister, let's talk next time. With that, he smiled. Holding Dosen's hand, he left the castle. Lavera's complexion was ashen. She foolishly stood in place and didn't continue to put on a brave front. Just now, when Dosen pounced on her, she was really scared. After all, she was just a flower in a greenhouse. On the castle's balcony, Madame Penelope was watering her new black nightshade with a kettle. No doubt, she clearly saw the scene that happened at the castle's entrance. She just muttered, "That's right. A girl should act like a girl, and a boy should act like a boy. Melissa and Mary, these 2 bitches, are not lacking in childbearing skills." Liszt didn't fool Lavera. He indeed had an appointment, or rather, he needed to find someone. He went straight to a small town near the Coral City. Looking at the dilapidated appearance of the town, he frowned slightly. Rome, is it here? Sir, it's here, Mosstown. I have been to this town before. Rome Wine Barrel replied. Whose fief is this town? It used to be a baron's fief. Later, it went bankrupt and was taken back by Sir Count. It has never been given out. Chapter 142. Who are you looking for? The wooden door of the small building opened, and a youngster dressed in black, with messy hair and sunken eyes, poked his head out. Looking at the group of people and the huge dog in front of him, he asked cautiously, "Does Mr. Glanny live here?" Thomas stepped forward, maintaining good etiquette, and asked gently, "Our master, the son of the Earl of Coral Island, Baron Listulip of Flower Town, wants to see him and ask him some questions about magic." Wait a moment." The youngster froze for a moment before closing the door. A moment later, the door was fully opened, and the youngster revealed his thin, shriveled figure. "Teacher, please go in, the others wait outside." Liszt nodded. "You stay outside." "Sir." Rome wanted to say something. Liszt waved his hand at him. On Coral Island, even the mysterious wizards had to give face to the Tulip family. Entering the small building, a strange smell drilled into his nose. It was not the kind of stench one would find in daily life, but the smell of some kind of chemical. He couldn't help but frown. The room was a bit dark, and he could see all kinds of messy equipment. Some were metal utensils, some were jade and crystal utensils. There were a lot of bottles and jars, and there was even an iron bottle burned with candles, with green juice boiling inside. The strange smell was probably coming from it. The room was very messy, and even the places to walk were not suitable for walking. "Teacher is upstairs, he is waiting for you." The youngster was a bit wooden. He looked at Liszt with only the nervousness of a stranger, not the fear and trepidation of an aristocrat. It was probably because he had followed wizards for too long that he had lost his reverence for aristocrat. An important reason why wizards were unpopular was that this group of people who believed in knowledge disregarded the authority of aristocrats, believing that knowledge was the only truth in the world, rather than the power that aristocrats believed in. The stairs creaked, but as they rose, the light became brighter and brighter. Then Liszt saw Granny Truth, a magician in his 40s with a hooked nose, blue eyes, and brown hair. He was shrouded in a loose cloak. He was sitting in a chair, reading a book. When he saw Liszt, he closed the book and placed it on the messy desk. Liszt's eyes were very sharp. He could clearly see that the cover of the book was written with the words "Speculation on the Alchemy of Iron," dedicated to His Excellency the Great Sorcerer Denbaba Truth. There was also a picture drawn at the bottom. It's a triangle with an eye in it. "Baron Liszt, compared to your brother, Viscount Levis, you look more like a graceful noble." Glanny stood up. He was even taller than Liszt. Under the cloak, he was also skinny. His voice was hoarse, as if he had not spoken for a long time. "Mr. Glanny, have you met my brother?" "Of course, I've worked with Viscount Levis a few times. Please take a seat. I don't pay attention to the hypocritical aristocratic etiquette here." Liszt found a relatively clean stool. "Aristocratic etiquette is not hypocrisy, it's cultivation." Granny sneered. "Cultured, are you talking about how to eat humans in a more cultured manner? If you have to understand it that way, it's fine." Liszt was somewhat disgusted by Glanny's attitude. He was used to being respected as a noble, but what the other said was quite reasonable. This world is not a dog-eat-dog world. The environment here is not so good. Of course it can't compare to a castle. I'm just a little mage. My energy and financial resources are all used to explore the truth of the world. Exploring the truth of the world was the slogan of mages. All mages would abandon their secular surnames and uniformly change their surnames to Truth. As for the triangle and eye on the book, it was called the Eye of Truth. Mages found that the triangle was the most stable structure, and the world was also made up of triangles: matter, spirit, and magic. And they were the eyes in the triangle, endlessly exploring all the truth. "Can I ask how to release magic?" "There is no difference between magic and qi. As a knight, why should you care about magic or qi? It's all about the control of magic." "Well, let's change the subject. How many mages are there on Coral Island?" Liszt asked casually. Apart from a small purpose, he came to visit the mage today because he was curious. Asking Levis is better than asking me. I can only tell you that there are only 3 mages in Coral City who have contacted me. Do you mages not often gather and communicate? The path of exploring the world is lonely. Magic is the embodiment of truth. Only by listening quietly can you understand the knowledge it wants to tell you. Liszt asked a few more questions, until Glanny became irritated. "Baron Liszt, did you come to visit me just to ask these ignorant questions? If so, please leave immediately and don't waste my time. My time is dedicated to the great truth, not chatting with you." "Of course it's not just to ask questions, I also want to cooperate with you." "Spit it out. If he had not inquired about Glanny's temper from Gort beforehand, List felt that this disrespectful guy should be dragged out and fed to Dosen. Of course, Dosen might not necessarily eat it. It liked to eat cooked food, or it needed to be barbecued first and sprinkled with cumin. Have you helped Tulip Castle or other aristocrats forge magic equipment? You need me to help you forge magic equipment. Glanny became a little interested and his tone calmed down. There is absolutely no problem with my skills. Even your father has asked me to repair a few pieces of magic equipment. List was also straightforward. He took out a fist-sized black pearl from his bosom and placed it on the table. Do you know what this is? Black pearl, you also have this thing. Have you seen a black pearl? Of course, Levis has also brought black pearls to forge magic equipment. This should be a specialty of your Tulip family, right? Compared to the white pearls of Blue Dragon Island, it has more abundant magic and is calmer. It is a good way to make a fortune. It turns out that the black pearl magic equipment in Levis's hands was also made by you. In that case, I will not beat around the bush. If this black pearl is bigger and has more magic power, can you make it into a magic equipment that can suppress storms on the sea? How big? List was careful and gestured the size of a basketball. This big black pearl, how about it? Glanny frowned and thought for a moment. I need to see the real thing to judge whether it can be forged and enough to suppress storms. But I think as long as the quality is up to standard, the manufacturing process is not a problem. I am a mage with 20 years of practical experience in magic runes and arrays. In magic practice, a magic apprentice was equivalent to a trainee knight, a mage was equivalent to an earth knight, an archmage was equivalent to a sky knight, and a magic shooter was equivalent to a dragon knight. Chapter 143. The real thing is in my castle. After all, it is a valuable item. If you accept the cooperation, you can go to Flower Town. List did not trust wizards. He did not have enough strength. Relying on the name of the Tulip family alone might not be enough to suppress the other party. In case the other party ran away with the black pearl, there would be no place to find it. Glanny shook his head. Do you think it is so easy to forge a magic equipment? If your black pearl is really big enough and good enough, then you will need more materials to forge it into a suitable magic equipment. In a countryside like Flower Town, you can't even buy the leftover materials. I have 2 caravans. Whatever materials are needed, they can be shipped back in time. List did not mind others looking down on Flower Town as a countryside. With a tiger in his heart, he naturally had a superior mentality. Besides, Mr. Glanny, don't you want to hear what I can pay? Oh, how much are you willing to pay? Levis asked you to forge the black pearl magic equipment. How much will you pay? Tell me the truth. I can ask Mr. Frank at any time. Well, aristocrats are really cunning. I can't fool you. Viscount Levis paid 3 gold coins, which is purely for the manual work. He sent the leftover materials, but his black pearl is only this big. You have such a big black pearl, the price will not be so cheap. In fact, I have no gold coins. No gold coins? Glanny stared. Baron List, are you kidding me? List said lightly. But I have the black pearl, don't I? Glanny's eyes quickly lit up. Oh, you are going to use this black pearl to pay for it? You think too much. Do you know how much a black pearl is worth? This black pearl is worth at least 200 gold coins. With so many gold coins, I can hire a great wizard to help me forge a magic equipment. List tossed the black pearl in his hand. Of course, it is not very difficult for you to earn it. The black pearl was obviously attractive to Glanny. He licked his lips and said, Tell me what you want. First, help me make a black pearl that can suppress storms. You will provide the materials for the edges. Second, teach me magic and provide me with knowledge and books. Third, I have a few crystals. Help me make crystal lamps. The rest, the remaining value of this black pearl, will be my financial support for your search for the truth. For List, the value of the black pearl itself was not high. On the Coral Island, apart from Levis, no one was willing to buy it. You want to learn magic? Glanny was a little surprised. This is not the style of you nobles. Moreover, magic and battle aura repel each other, yet you want to give up your noble status and become a magician? Chi refines one's own mana, while magic absorbs mana from the outside world. Although they were both magic powers, they would repel each other in terms of cultivation. It was not that no nobles had ever tried to cultivate magic, but it was very difficult to succeed. This was just like how magic required the mind to maintain rationality and clarity at all times, but Do Chi required the mind to be hot-blooded. If one practiced both magic and martial arts, they would have a split personality. List said, I just want to understand the principles of magic release. As the soul of a modern civilization with scientific literacy in the 21st century, he naturally had a strong desire to learn about this different world full of magic power. He had already come into contact with and cultivated Qi, and his understanding of Qi was quite profound. However, he knew nothing about magic. Getting close to magicians and understanding magic was what he had always wanted to do. The construction of his territory was on the right track, and he had the strength to protect himself. He could learn more about the outside world according to his own ideas. It seems that you are an aristocrat with exuberant curiosity. In that case, I will accept this black pearl. Glanny thought for a moment and agreed. I hope you will have a good time in the flower town. Oh, by the way, there is a house for you to live in the flower town. You can transport the materials and equipment you need to the flower town through the flower caravan. I don't intend to stay in the countryside for long. I will come back after I have forged the magic equipment and taught you what magic is. The Moss Town is only a quarter of an hour away from the Coral City. The prosperity of the city is so lingering. He went to the window and looked in the direction of the Coral City in the distance. In his eyes, a city piled with feces was a symbol of prosperity. With a glance, he saw a group of people waiting outside the small building, as well as the huge Dosen. Is that your pet? A World of Warcraft flying dust dog? Why is it so big? In my memory, no flying dust dog can grow so big. Because it eats well. Magician Glanny Truth needed time to prepare before he could rush to the flower town. List returned with his people first. Meanwhile, in the direction of the Coral City near the Tulip Castle, in a small 2-story house with a garden, Frank had just finished his afternoon nap. He went downstairs to the living room and sat down on a chair. The servant immediately served tea. He was an aristocrat, a lord knight, and had his own fief, a small village. Compared to a bankrupt and destitute noble like Gort, his fief was still considered wealthy. Every year, it brought him a surplus of a dozen or so gold coins. Coupled with his salary as Levis's tutor, he lived a happy life. Madam and young lady have yet to return from their stroll in the sea of flowers? They have returned and are enjoying the shade in the small garden. After a while, his wife and daughter returned to the house. Frank, are you awake? The middle-aged woman wore a fashionable round skirt. Despite the heavy makeup, it still could not change the fact that she was gradually aging. Are you going to do something for the Tulip Castle in the afternoon? Shirley wants you to accompany her back to the manor. She left her clothes in the cupboard. Frank looked at his daughter. I remember that you brought a lot of clothes, plus the clothes you bought on the Iron Hoof Island. Isn't that enough? But I forgot to bring a black gown. I like it very much, Dad. Shirley swayed her thin waist. Have the servant go back and get it. I don't have time, dear. Frank spread his hands, explaining to both his daughter and his wife. Levis is still on the battlefield. I need to be in charge of the properties under his name. I also need to be in charge of the part of the authority given to him by the Count to govern the Coral Island. I understand, now is a good opportunity for you to show your abilities, but I hope you can also take some time to care more about Shirley. She is already 15 years old. 15 years old meant that she had reached the age of socializing. Aristocratic girls were about to get married at the age of 16 or 17. Frank looked at his increasingly beautiful daughter and was very pleased. Of course, I know that Shirley is already a big girl. In fact, I was worried about her this morning. On the Coral Island, there are not many aristocrats suitable for Shirley. I hope she can get the best happiness. His wife suddenly became interested. What are you worried about? Who are you looking for her? Shirley also looked at her father expectantly. As an aristocratic lady, socializing was a necessary skill to learn, and there was no need to be shy when talking about marriage. Chapter 144. List. Frank uttered the name. Flower Town Baron, Sir Count's third child. Surely, you must still have an impression of him. You always played behind him when you were a child. Is it Brother List? Of course I remember him. Shirley blinked her eyes, and a slightly childish handsome face appeared in her mind. List was very handsome since he was a child. However, she had already left the Coral Island and went to the Oxhorn College to study for a few years. Due to the inconvenience of traveling by ship, she did not return home even during New Year's Day. Her impression of List had gradually faded. At that time, she had not yet reached the age of admiring the opposite sex. Naturally, she did not have a clear memory of a certain companion. What do you think of List? Asked Frank. Shirley shook her head. Dad, I have only seen Big Brother List when he was 12 years old. At that time, he was just a child. Now that he is an adult, I have no idea what he has become. You should find an opportunity to meet him. At this time, Frank's wife asked. Sir Count does not seem to value List. His fief has been moved to the most remote flower town. List is indeed not valued by Sir Count. Sir Count relied on his determination to forge ahead and establish the Coral Island. He hopes that his children can move forward bravely, said Frank, but in any case, he is of the Tulip family's bloodline and was enfeoffed upon reaching adulthood. This is not a treatment that an ordinary aristocrat's second son can enjoy. The Count is just Sir Count's benevolence. He is a dutiful father. Even Elvira was enfeoffed by Baron List, said the wife enviously. Elvira was very influential among the Coral Islands' aristocratic ladies. She was a hereditary dame, which was rare even in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. The reason why Sir Count does not value List is that List is not talented and has a soft personality. But from my recent contact, List has been reborn. He is calm and dignified. He is becoming more and more mature. Sir Count even went to the flower town to celebrate the Going Out to the Sea festival, which is a sign. What sign? What other sign could it be? The sons have regained their father's trust. The Count is still in the prime of his life. Of course he wants to be with his sons and obtain more glory as a knight. Is that so? But he hasn't gone to the battlefield. Levis has. It's only a matter of time. He has the blood of the Tulip family and the Taro family in him. Frank felt that his wife had the narrow-mindedness of a small noble in the countryside, so he told his daughter directly, Surely, List has already prepared his own night squad. He bought a batch of equipment for the night squad from Tulip Castle. No compliment was as convincing as action. A country lord with a squad of night was naturally not ordinary. Shirley's eyes lit up. Dad, Mom, when can I see Brother List? I think I have the ability to judge for myself. Our Shirley is smart and beautiful. Of course, she has her own vision. Daddy will find opportunities for you soon. His footsteps were unsteady. He was tired and hungry. Ivan wiped off the sweat on his forehead and looked at his peers with numb eyes, who also had the same numb eyes. Their clothes were dirty and smelly, their hair was a mess, and the dust on their faces could not hide their paleness and sallow color. It was hard to distinguish between men and women, old and young. Even the cries of the babies were weak. "Hurry up, if you don't want to be whipped, cheer up and keep up with the team," the clerk holding the whip shouted loudly. From time to time, the whip would be lashed in the air, making crackling sound. Ivan's whole body trembled. His slightly dizzy head suddenly sobered up, and his heavy footsteps could not help but quicken. Just a moment ago, the person next to him was whipped by the clerk. His clothes were torn, and he was in so much pain that he cried. Crack! There was another crack of the whip. Ivan lowered his head and clenched his teeth so that he could move faster. He was very afraid of the whip. When he was on the ship, his companion from the same town, who slept in the same corner as him, was whipped to death by the ship's first mate. The wailing before death had made him have nightmares for several nights. Inside the dream was a nightmare. In reality, it was also a nightmare. He missed the days of hard farming on the island, although there was not enough to eat, and there were night whipping serfs who could not pay taxes. But most of the time, he was free to walk around and chat with others. He even went to the town to take a look at the beautiful proprietress of the bakery. However, one day everything changed. He heard the knight shouting and killing, and then a group of blood-stained knights came to his village and drove them away. Some people did not want to go and were killed. Those who did not want to be killed could only follow them. It was on this day that he left his homeland and began a constant nightmare. He was taken to a market, where serfs like him were being sold. He was locked in a cage, eating some rotten black bread, muddle-headed. Serfs around him were constantly taken away, and new serfs were constantly locked in. Then, he was also taken away. He followed a group of strangers onto a big ship. He could not understand the people on the ship, and did not dare to speak to them. Unexpectedly, there was a person on the ship who knew him. They were from the same town. "It's the Sapphire people," his companion told him. He instantly thought of the legend of the barbarians. Every year, there would be sea barbarians who came to the Eagle Kingdom to burn, kill, and loot. They were all from the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. The Sapphire people were on the ship, and we were sold to the barbarians. The ones who caught us were mercenaries. They were more hateful than rats. His companion said resentfully, "I swear. One day, I will come back, find these mercenaries, and kill them all." Ivan did not answer. He was frightened by his companion's words. He had been farming since he was a child, and he had never killed a chicken, because there were no chickens at home. Only the nobles killed serfs, and serfs did not dare to kill people. Unfortunately, his companion was whipped to death soon after he made the oath. Ivan had no one to talk to, and continued to have nightmares that he could not wake up from. He had never been on a ship, and he almost fainted. Today, a few days later, he finally set foot on land, and came to a completely strange place. He could not understand a word spoken by the people here. He also did not know where he was being driven to. He was confused about tomorrow. He did not know what he was persevering for, and he did not even know what perseverance was. He just followed the whip and went wherever he went. He never thought about death, and he did not know what joy there was in life. He did not know how many times his legs had become numb. He heard the clerk brandishing his whip and shouting something. He could not understand, but the team slowly stopped. When others stopped, he also stopped. Finally, he could rest his legs for a while. He saw others start to sit down. He followed and sat down again. No one spoke. Everyone on the ship was forbidden to communicate, and now they were used to silence. He looked up and his eyes fell on a female serf not far in front of him. She was preparing to feed the child. She lifted her ragged clothes, exposed her shriveled chest, and stuffed it into the baby's mouth. The baby sucked hard, not knowing if he could suck a little milk. If it was in the past, Ivan would have swallowed his saliva and greedily peeped at the woman's chest. He was still young and had never touched a woman's hand, let alone her bulging chest. But at the moment the chest was unattractive, and he did not have the slightest thought to think about it. His stomach was so hungry that his intestines were about to be mixed together. The sun moved overhead and it was noon. P.S. Follow the official WeChat account Lamakes 666. Chapter 145. Ivan sat on the ground, and soon learned to lie down on the ground, resting as much as possible and recovering a little strength. He didn't know where he was going and how long he had to walk. Every sound. There was the sound of wheels turning. Ivan didn't get up, but slowly turned his head and looked in the direction of the sound in the most effortless way. He saw a convoy of carriages with a flag embroidered with purple-black flowers on a blue background. He recognized this flag, which was used to indicate aristocratic status. Of course, he didn't know which aristocratic family this flag belonged to. Just as he was looking at the carriages without any thoughts, the familiar sound of the whip rang out again. As if there were springs installed in his body, he subconsciously got up from the ground and stood properly. Not only him, but everyone else did the same, getting up from the ground and standing properly shakily. The scribe raised his whip and shouted something in a loud voice. Ivan didn't understand. However, they soon understood. Someone used the wind language of the Eagle Kingdom and shouted loudly, "Everyone, line up. Follow the instructions of the clerks. Line up behind each carriage. Don't talk, don't move, stand properly." Ivan began to panic a little. He didn't know how to stand in a line, and had never stood in a line before. Seeing others move, he also moved. Then he was kicked in the buttocks. A clerk scolded him in words he didn't understand. It seemed that he found the confusion on his face. The clerk pulled him over, stuffed him behind a serf, and scolded him again. Then he went to pull the second serf. The messy procession was quickly arranged into 6 crooked groups under the arrangement of the clerks. The sapphire man who knew wind language walked to the front of the line, talked with several people who looked aristocratic for a moment, and then faced the many serfs. "You have 2 meals a day, traveled thousands of miles to Coral Island, and are about to go to the place where you will live in the future, Flower Town." Ivan, like the others, looked numbly at the speaker and didn't respond. The speaker continued. "The lord of the Flower Town, Sir Baron List of the mighty Tulip family's bloodline, is also your master from now on. Remember the place where you will live from now on, the Flower Town. Remember your future master, List Tulip, the descendant of the mighty Tulip family." The last few words were shouted out in a very imposing manner. However, the serfs below remained calm. The speaker didn't care at all. He waved his arms, his grizzled hair disheveled in the wind. "Remember, from now on you need to speak the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. Of course, you are just a group of serfs. No one cares if you can speak serpentines or not. However, you need to remember the words Flower Town, Tulip, and Sir Lord. Now repeat these 3 phrases after me." He shouted, "Say these 3 words correctly, and you'll enjoy a wonderful lunch, understand?" Lunch, in an instant, stirred up the silent and numb team. The hungry serfs couldn't stand the excitement of lunch. On the ship, they only ate 2 meals a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and then lay still. A courageous serf trembled and responded, "Understood, sir." "Very well, now repeat after me, Flower Town, Flower Town." "Louder, Flower Town, Flower Town." Ivan felt that he was so hungry that he couldn't speak, but for the sake of the upcoming lunch, he still stirred up the little strength left in his body and shouted along with the others, "Flower Town." The word was not a mouthful. It was easy to learn. After shouting it a few times, he was even a little excited that he had learned a foreign language. "Very well, it seems that you have mastered the word Flower Town. Next, repeat after me, Tulip, Tulip." "Tulip, fool, don't tilt your tongue, repeat again, Tulip, Tulip." "Louder, Tulip." Tulip. Although it is not standard, remember it, here, everything on this land belongs to the tulip family. Your lord is of the bloodline of the tulip family. The person who could speak wind language continued to teach. Next, you need to understand how to express your loyalty when you meet your lord. You first have to kneel down. Several serfs, as soon as they heard kneeling down, immediately knelt down. The other serfs also knelt down. In an instant, all 6 teams knelt down. The speaker was shocked. He was not list and dared not let the serfs kneel down to him. He quickly dodged. Fool, I didn't ask you to kneel down now, forget it. You kneel down in front of the black tulip flag on the carriage, as if you saw Sir Lord. Now repeat after me, Sir Lord. Sir Lord. Ivan knelt on the ground and shouted with the crowd, trying to straighten his tongue. After a few times, the person who could speak wind language ran to a nearby row of noblemen and said in Serpentine, Mr. Gort, is this teaching okay? Gort, dressed in frac habillé, nodded and said, That's all for today's pre-lunch teaching. Let the serfs fill their stomachs first. The flower town is not a place so poor that they can't even afford to eat. Old Grandette, it's been hard on you. I still need you to translate for the serfs in the future. Old Grandette said with a smile, It is Old Grandette's honor to serve Sir Lord. Then I will tell them to start eating. Immediately, he faced the serfs who were still kneeling on the ground. You can get up and continue to stand in your line. Now, lunch will be distributed. One by one, everyone has a share, no looting allowed. Otherwise, the whip of a clerical petty official will not have eyes. Hearing Old Grandette's words, the uneasiness of the serfs quickly turned into a pleasant surprise. There was really lunch. Then, as the carriage opened, portions of food that they had never seen before were placed on plates of bread and handed to them. There were no cutlery such as knives and forks, only food and plate of bread. Ivan got his share of food. He recognized plate of bread. He used to use plate of bread. After a certain amount of time, he could cook it and continue to eat it. On the plate of bread there was half a piece of black bread, and then there were many big and small, round and flat things. He couldn't help but reach out and touch it. It was very hard, but he didn't know how to eat it. Fortunately, he always did what others did. He saw that in addition to eating the black bread, some people had already opened it and eaten the soft things inside. So, he sat on the ground with the plate of bread and took a big bite of the black bread. Then, he imitated others and opened it. It was very easy to open it because it had a crack in it. He could open it with his hands. His nose quickly smelled a very strange fragrance. After swallowing the bread, Ivan saw several people eat it in a row. He plucked up his courage and took a bite. It was very soft and almost melted in his mouth. He didn't know what it tasted like, but he felt it was delicious. He no longer cared about it and focused on eating his share. Perhaps he had been hungry for too long. In just a short while, he had already eaten all the food. When the last shelled thing went down his stomach, it was almost the first time in his life. He felt what it meant to be full. At this moment, Old Grandette's shout once again reached Ivan's ears. It seems that you have eaten your fill. What a bunch of lucky fellows. Remember this feeling. From today on, in the flower town, so long as you work hard for the great Sir Lord, you will be able to eat such food every day. Ivan heard someone exclaim next to him. He was also shocked. He could eat such food every day and eat until he was full. Chapter 146. On the second day after returning to the castle, the 476 serfs camped in the wild for the night arrived at Flower Town. After eating a few full meals, the serfs' complexions were still very poor, but at least in terms of spirit, there was a great improvement. In the afternoon, the sun was setting in the west, and all the serfs lined up on the main road of Flower Town, waiting quietly. Riding on Black Dragon, List, surrounded by the night squad, came to the front of the procession. Thomas held Tremblingwoods by the hand and followed his every step. Now, he would bring Tremblingwoods along whenever he went out. It was quite an interesting scene of a man taking advantage of a dog's power. "Sir, the quality of this batch of serfs is very poor." Marcus glanced at them and frowned. "There are indeed very few able-bodied serfs, but there are a lot of children. They can be trained well and become knight candidates in the future," Liszt said simply. While talking, Gort came over to greet him. "Sir, the serfs have finally arrived at Flower Town, and none of them got lost. Well done. Forget about the losses at sea. I don't want them to suffer any more losses on Coral Island. So, sir, should we start arranging for them to kneel and pledge their loyalty to you?" "Yes." When serfs saw the lord, they needed to pledge their loyalty, which was a form of selling themselves as a slave. When old Grandette received Gort's instructions, he immediately faced the serfs and shouted in wind language, "Lowly serfs, the great bloodline of the Tulip family, the Lord of Flower Town, is standing in front of you. Now kneel and pledge your loyalty to Sir Lord." In an instant, the serfs knelt on the ground and shouted in the newly learned Serpentine, "Sir Lord." It was not neat, but the voice was loud. The shouts of nearly 500 people, even if they were just a group of ragged, tall and short, emaciated, old and weak serfs, still had a bit of momentum. Liszt was already accustomed to such a scene. In the Flower Town, people kowtowing to him happened every day. Therefore, he just looked at the group of serfs with a smile on his face. The serfs kneeling on the ground buried their heads deep in the ground, not daring to look directly at their future master. After a while, Liszt, who had prepared his lines, opened his mouth. "I accept your loyalty. From now on, you have become a part of the Flower Town. Work hard for me, and you will receive my protection and live a stable life." After saying that, he looked at old Grandette, who acted as the translator. Old Grandette understood and translated. "Sir Lord has accepted your loyalty. Sir Lord has told you that from now on, you will become a part of the Flower Town and work hard for Sir Lord. Then you will get Sir Lord's protection and live a stable life in the Flower Town, understand?" "Understood. Yes. Thank you, my lord. I will work hard." The serfs responded sparsely. Many of them still didn't know what to say and just knelt. Seeing this, Liszt said, "Old Grandette, let them rise." So it was. The short serf reception ceremony came to an end. Liszt didn't stop and returned to the castle. Marcus continued to lead the night squad back to the Thorns Woods to guard the logging team. Gort and the other officials started to get busy. They had to arrange the lives and jobs of the 476 serfs in a short time. Fortunately, many wooden houses had already been built in the fief and the settlement. There were also many wooden houses in the unfinished commercial district, workshop district, and residential district that could provide temporary residences. There was no shortage of food. There might not be much bread and vegetables, but there was enough seafood. Even if there wasn't enough, the oyster settlement's fishermen would have enough to go to the sea a few more times. "We need to complete the distribution of serfs as soon as possible. The autumn harvest is coming," Gort said loudly. "The census of resources has yet to be completed. There are too many serf women, children, and the elderly. The original arrangement plan is no longer suitable. We need to make adjustments." Isaiah responded. Blair watched as the serfs squeezed into the wooden houses and prepared to spend the night. He said with a smile, "Children and breastfeeding women should be put aside for the time being. As for the other serfs who can work, it would be better to send them to the Thorns Ridge to carry timber, carry stones, and be responsible for repairing road." Gort interrupted, "This is not a responsible distribution plan. What I mean is that we should not make arrangements for the time being. We should wait until the census of resources is completed before making overall arrangements." "Well, this is also a good idea. It is indeed difficult to make arrangements in a short time, but we can't keep them in vain. We can just send them to the logging team. At the banquet, Gort conveyed Blair's suggestion to List. List approved of it and added, "Arrange for craftsmen to do some light work as much as possible. Don't arrange for the weak or sick serfs to do any work. Let them rest well." Among the serfs, he valued craftsmen the most. Craftsmen's skills were the world's technology and an indispensable part of a prosperous fief. Suddenly, he thought of something and said, "You should rest a little later tonight. First, make a list of craftsmen, especially what skills they have mastered. I will have the castle's servants help me record it. I hope to see them tomorrow morning." Nowadays, List's words were law in the flower town. The next morning, after he got up and walked the dog, a thick bast paper list was placed on the dining table. After taking a bath and changing into loose clothes, he sat at the dining table, ready to enjoy breakfast. It was time for Carter to order the footman to bring breakfast. A cup of fragrant fresh milk, a pineapple bun and milk-flavored bread, a fried egg, a large piece of fried World of Warcraft meat, a vegetable salad, and a few fruit. This was his standard breakfast. It was worth at least a dozen silver coins, especially the World of Warcraft meat, which was very valuable. But who told him to be rich recently? As the Coral Islands' invisible tycoon, he didn't want to be wronged. It had never been his style to work hard and live simply. If he could enjoy it, then he would. He picked up the milk and took a big gulp. The castle's milk is still better. I feel that the flower town's climate and environment are definitely suitable for raising cows. He licked the milk foam at the corner of his lips and made his own judgment. Sherlock has already bought 3 calves. Now that the pasture is occupied by horses, it is impossible to raise more cows, master. List said firmly. Once the Thorns Ridge is developed, the dairy farm will definitely expand, at least double in size. I want to raise more cows. Because the milk tea was getting better and better, he had specially investigated the dairy farm. He didn't find any reason for the improvement in the quality of the milk produced by the cows. At least, it wasn't due to the fact that the cows had entered pregnancy and compared to the milk of the cows outside. He could clearly feel the difference in the taste of the milk. The milk of the Flower Town's dairy farm was not only fragrant, but also more refreshing. Later, List speculated that it might be due to feeding them a new breed of corn grass. As a result, after feeding them separately, he found that it had nothing to do with corn grass. Therefore, he believed that the Flower Town's climate was suitable for raising cows. He took a bite of the pineapple bun. Chapter 147. Outside of farming, commoners with a technical nature were called craftsmen. Commoners among craftsmen, who relied on their skills to run their own shops, could be called craftsmen. Therefore, craftsmen were mostly freedmen, while craftsmen were mostly serfs. According to List's understanding, after a period of development, these people would become bourgeois if they engaged in their own business. However, through his understanding of the society of a different world, it was impossible for craftsmen to evolve into capitalists for the time being, as the aristocracy would not allow it. Take Earth's medieval Europe as a reference. With the progress of the Industrial Revolution, craftsmen who grasped the means of production would either accumulate the means of production and evolve into capitalists, or lose the means of production and be reduced to workers. Here, craftsmen had existed for a long time, and they were still craftsmen. There were no capitalists, and there were no large numbers of workers. No matter how they developed, they were still vassals of the aristocracy. The cultivation of qi and the absolute disparity in individual strength allowed the aristocratic knight to firmly grasp all the power without fear of being revolutionized by the new class. Of course, the development of craftsmen in different countries and different cities was more or less different. There was no fixed division of levels. List summed it up simply. Craftsmen could be roughly divided into 4 levels: master, craftsman, and worker. Master, a technician, master. Craftsmen of this level generally lived in big cities. They were freedmen with high status, and had reached the level of lesser aristocracy. For example, architects, shipbuilders, carters, goldsmiths, jewelers, blacksmiths, drillers, and so on were all top craftsmen in their respective industries. Architects were responsible for building castles, large buildings, mage towers, and so on. Shipbuilders were responsible for designing and building ships. Carters were responsible for producing carriages, mining carts, and chariots. Goldsmiths forged gold, silver, copper, and even dragon coins. Jewelers designed precious jewelry, carved crystals, jade, and even gems. Blacksmiths could make all kinds of excellent equipment, and drillers could dig mines. On the Coral Island, there were only architects, shipbuilders, carters, and blacksmiths. There were no goldsmiths, jewelers, or drillers. Craftsmen. Craftsmen of this level were the backbone of craftsmen and also the most basic social class in the various large cities. They filled all walks of life and were the cornerstone of the prosperity of cities and territories. Most of them were free citizens and could choose to run shops or sell their craft. Stonemasons, carpenters, blacksmiths, cobblers, and tailors were the 5 most basic professions for craftsmen, and also the 5 professions with the largest number of people. Masons build buildings, carpenters make furniture, blacksmiths forge tools, cobblers tan leather goods, and tailors make clothes. In addition, there are also bone craftsmen, paper craftsmen, thick bast paper, locksmiths, shoemakers, cooper craftsmen, crystal craftsmen, jewelers, gem craftsmen, jade craftsmen, soap makers, wine makers, bakers, barbers, cooks, sugar makers, spices makers, and salt makers. Worker. Craftsmen of this level were also the backbone of craftsmen, but they existed on a large scale in the manner of the Lord. Most of them were serfs, almost no different from farmers who worked in the fields. They were only engaged in slightly skilled work. Embroidery workers, spinners, dyers, salt workers, sugar workers, grinders, miners, sailors, boatmen, handymen, and so on were all workers. In addition, merchants such as hotel owners, peddlers, grocery store owners, and horse dealers did not possess craftsmanship, but were responsible for the circulation of craftsmanship. Their status was generally equivalent to that of craftsmen, that is, ordinary free citizens. Finally, family, everyone. At this level, they could not be considered craftsmen, but rather artists. Novelists, bards, pianists, painters, court musicians, sculptors, singers, and so on, most of them belonged to the aristocratic class. They did not have titles to inherit, so they developed their own artistic cells, wandered among the aristocracy, and enjoyed a high quality of life. If one had to continue to define them, a wizard who could make magic equipment and an iron knight, who could make a variety of weapons were also considered craftsmen. But they were either outside the system or they were aristocrat. There are no technicians and there are very few craftsmen. Most of them are workers. It feels like the money spent is a bit of a waste. Looking at the thick bast paper Liszt in his hand, Liszt thought regretfully. What he wanted was actually craftsmen, but the serfs he bought were basically workers. Obviously, this batch of craftsmen were leftovers from other people, or it could be said that Levis's subordinates were only willing to buy cheap craftsmen. In the serf market, the price of a craftsman was obviously a bit more expensive than a worker, let alone a technician. No one would sell technicians, craftsmen, workers, and farmers at the same price. In any case, with a group of skilled workers, I can barely add a few industries to the flour town. I can make sugar, soap, weave, and even dry salt in seawater, make paper using indigenous methods, or develop other industries. Liszt comforted himself. It could not be considered a comfort. Skilled workers were still very valuable. He asked Thomas to bring a quill, ink, and blank thick bast paper, and he began to write and draw. He was going to calculate how many industries these craftsmen could develop and how many workshops could be added to the town's workshop area. But as he wrote and wrote, He studied from the development of handicrafts to the social system. If I want to, I can become a sociologist. He divided the social system of the other world into categories. The upper class of society, aristocratic lords. The middle and upper class, wizards who pursue the truth. Officials without titles, knight, and indispensable artist. The middle and middle class, technicians who master irreplaceable skills, mercenaries who work as knight. The middle and lower class, servants in the castle, craftsmen who produce technology, merchants who circulate goods, workers who work as coolies, and rats who walk in the dark. The bottom class, serfs who farm, beggars who have not even become serfs. It's very clear, it's clear at a glance. He took a big bite of World of Warcraft meat, chewed and swallowed. If I can further elaborate on the responsibilities of each social class in society, as well as the mobility of social classes, I can probably write a great book on sociology and publish it. This was just an idea. He had not yet fallen to the point where he needed to write books to earn a living. That was something only the children of aristocrats would do. Moreover, sociology works could not be sold. To write a book, he had to write a night novel. To slay a dragon, to contract the elf king. It was best to start with a prince in dire straits with a little elf. He would wander the sea and have a romantic night with the singing demon. After a few days of flirting with the noblewomen in the Marquis manor, he would kill an evil dragon alone, or ride a dragon. The little elf would then break through to become an elf king. In the end, the hero saves the beauty and marries the beautiful princess recognized by the unicorn. With these elements, it was basically a best-selling night novel. Those young people who loved fantasy were very willing to buy it. After breakfast. Chapter 148. Glanny Truth's letter was delivered to the castle by the flower caravan's transport team. List delayed his arrival. The materials to forge the Black Pearl magic equipment were lacking, which required some time to prepare. He would probably go to Flower Town in mid-October. What a waste of my time. I should have asked another wizard to visit. List was not very happy when he saw the letter. He felt that the wizard did not give him face. It took more than a week to prepare the materials. List's efficiency was too low. He suspected that the wizard was perfunctory. However, there were not many wizards that he could come into contact with. This kind of creature always lived in seclusion and did not easily come into contact with ordinary people. If List was not a member of the Tulip family, perhaps Glanny would not have met him. Probably the aristocrats would not let the wizards settle in their city. They would always make an explosion from time to time to scare people. List threw away the letter. List no longer paid attention to when Glanny would come. Currently, the resource census and the logging war were being carried out in Flower Town at the same time. Although Gort worked hard as an advisor, there were still a lot of things that annoyed List. He had his own troubles. Standing in front of the window of the castle, he frowned as he looked at Blessed Curls, whose feet were chained. Squawk! Squawk! Blessed Curls continued to make noises, constantly shaking its wings that were full of feathers. The sapphire pupils turned into a whirlpool. List cast magic eyes. In his eyes, Blessed Curls became a fat bird made of cyan magic. Blessed Curls has already reached the stage of releasing magic. In a few days, I'm afraid that he will be able to release magic on his own without my guidance. Eating too well is also a kind of burden. Should I adjust his diet? This bird's meal is equivalent to 3 tons of food for the servants. Blessed Curls was not big. When nested, it was the size of a dog. But it was still a World of Warcraft, and its appetite was far greater than that of an ordinary bird. It is not worthwhile to feed it like this. If he couldn't find an eagle tamer, Blessed Curls would forever be a wild and untamable monster in World of Warcraft. Its greatest use was to kill it for meat and sell its materials for gold. Shaking his head, List decided not to kill it for the time being. After taking care of it for so long, they were already familiar with each other. No matter how he teased it, Blessed Curls wouldn't bite him. It just dodged because it didn't like people touching it. There is still friendship between us. Life in Flower Town was busy and orderly. Gort presided over the census of resources very quickly. The information was gathered and sent to the castle. Heated discussions began during the banquet. According to Sir's instructions, the serfs in the town will be converted into full-time workers. The farming serfs will receive interest-free loans from the castle. The loans will not go through the hands of the serfs, but will be directly handed to the serfs in the form of farming tools, and the serfs will be instructed in scientific farming. Gort recited the long speech he had written with great emotion. The resource census was a political achievement project that he had presided over, so of course, he was full of passion. At present, the results of the Flower Town's resource census are as follows: peanut settlement, 100 mu of peanut field with a peanut sprite worm, 20 mu of corn field, 500 mu of wasteland to be reclaimed, mostly weeds, 20 mu of housing area. Shiitake settlement, 80 mu of shiitake shed, 30 mu of mixed shiitake and flame mushroom greenhouses, 800 mu of wasteland to be reclaimed, mostly shrubs, 30 mu of housing area. Barley settlement, 50 mu of barley field, 50 mu of oat field, 150 mu of naked wheat field, 30 mu of corn field, 50 mu of corn field, and a corn sprite worm. 500 mu of uncultivated land, mostly covered with weeds, 1,800 mu of beech, some of which had fragrant coconut trees, and 50 mu of housing area. Wheat settlement, 500 mu of wheat field with a wheat sprite worm, 1 pig farm with 12 fat pigs, 300 mu of wasteland to be reclaimed, mostly weeds, 50 mu of housing area. Tomato settlement, 80 mu of tomato field with a tomato sprite worm, 20 mu of vegetable field, 40 mu of wasteland to be reclaimed, mostly weeds, 60 mu of housing area. Oyster settlement, 4,600 mu of beech, some of which are fragrant coconut trees and a fragrant coconut sprite worm. Fruit-stealing monkey farm, 7 fruit-stealing monkeys, 3 of which are pregnant females. Housing area covers 30 mu of land. Dairy farm, 150 mu of alfalfa pasture with 11 cows, 3 of which are pregnant females, 180 mu of thorns forest with a thorns sprite worm, 300 mu of wasteland to be reclaimed, mostly shrubs, 1,700 mu of beech with some fragrant coconut trees, 15 mu of housing area. Flower farm, 200 mu of tulip field, 15 mu of which are Sundance tulip, 10 mu of which are William I tulip, 20 mu of which are black tulip, and the rest are wasteland, 500 mu of wasteland to be reclaimed, mostly shrubs and weeds, 20 mu of housing area. Town, 40 mu of commercial area, 80 mu of workshop area, 150 mu of serf residential area, 120 mu of freeman residential area, 80 mu of aristocratic residential area, 10 mu of administrative office area. Most of the land occupied by houses was planned, and the land occupied by houses was very small. Castle, 120 mu of alfalfa pasture with an alfalfa sprite worm, 22 horses, 7 of which are pregnant females, 5 mu of black nightshade field with a black nightshade sprite worm, 20 mu of castle, 400 mu of wasteland to be reclaimed, mostly shrubs and weeds. The town's arable land was about 5,165 mu, the beach was about 8,100 mu, and the buildings were about 775 mu. Including rivers, ponds, and roads, the town had a total of 15,000 mu of land. As for the standard for this mu, List wasn't clear on it, as he lacked comparison. If his body had transmigrated here, he could easily understand the weights and measures here with himself as a reference. Unfortunately, his soul had transmigrated. It didn't matter whether he was a giant or a dwarf compared to his past self, as he was already accustomed to the units of measurement here. The flower town has an area of about 15,000 mu, the Thorns Ridge has an area of about 13,000 mu, which adds up to 28,000 mu. This is the area of my territory. Oh, I also have to count the 5,000 mu of beach exposed at low tide, so I have 33,000 mu of land. The town with an area of 33,000 mu was already a relatively large town on the Coral Island. He also took the time to draw a detailed topographic map of the flower town. The map was certainly not standard, but the basic framework should be correct. There were mountains and rivers, and the road was clear. His gaze wandered around the map, and soon he looked at the northern side of the Thorns Ridge. From here there are only low shrubs, and further out there are large areas of unreclaimed wasteland. Should I enclose this area as well? After thinking about it, he gave up. Swallowing the Thorns Ridge was already greedy enough, and it was better to make a fortune in silence. Being greedy to swallow another piece of land was likely to backfire and cause the Count and Levis to be unhappy. The wasteland of the flower town has not been reclaimed yet, so I should first develop in a low-key manner and steadily. I have a smoke mission, so there is no need to take risk. It is still the same old principle: accumulate food, build high walls, and slowly become king. I am 16 years old this year, so I have set a small goal for myself. When I am 20, I will have my own island. Information about the Black Horse Island emerged in his mind. Chapter 149. Mission completed. Reward: wood variant, fast-growing variety of thorns. The slowly changing smoke in front of List's eyes made him feel at ease. From the start of the World of Warcraft until mid-October, after nearly a month of logging, the logging team finally cut down all the trees in the Thorns Ridge. The once not so lush but still verdant forest had completely turned into a barren undulating slope. If there was an environmental protection organization here, they would definitely express a serious protest to List. The destruction of vegetation and soil erosion were crimes against humanity. Unfortunately, this was List's territory. He could do whatever he wanted. Besides, the Coral Island was verdant. What was the big deal about cutting down a few trees? With sprites in this world, there was no need to fear desertification. Moreover, there was no industrial development here. Whether it was the island or the mainland, no matter how barren the land was, at least 70% of the area was covered by forest. At least 95% of the area was covered by vegetation. Whether it was farmland or weeds, there would be no lack of plant. Therefore, List never paid attention to environmental protection. Wood variant? What does that mean? This was the reward of the Thorns Worm Chain mission. Previously, he was rewarded with spiky variant and poisonous variant thorns. Spiky variant and poisonous variant were easy to understand, but now the wood variant was a bit troublesome. Wood variant? Does it mean the quality of the wood? His clever brain worked quickly. There are differences between trees. Some trees are suitable for making furniture, but they are outrageously expensive. Some trees are even despised for making paper. Wood variant, fast-growing variety of thorns. Does it mean that the wood attribute of thorns has changed? Ordinary thorns, apart from being used as hedges, were not of much use. They could neither blossom nor bear fruit, nor were they very hard. They were of little value. I can't figure it out. I still have to see the real thing, then study the fast-growing wood thorns to determine its value. In the blink of an eye, List had already named the new variety of thorns. At this time, the smoke in front of him changed into a new chapter. Mission: the Flower Town's business district is gradually flourishing, but the workshop area has been idle for a long time. There are not enough workshops to support it. How can craftsmen be wasted on cutting down trees and farming? Please build 3 new workshops to increase the town's prosperity. Reward: Chi bottleneck. List's eyes widened. He saw the strange reward of bottleneck of chi. However, he wasn't surprised at all, only pleasantly surprised. My first mission reward was the advancement of my chi, allowing me to smoothly break through from an apprentice knight to an earth knight. This time, it's the chi bottleneck. Does this mean that I'm about to become an elite earth knight? That must be it. Referring to the basic, intermediate, advanced, and dragon battle chi divisions, the knight is divided into trainee knight, earth knight, sky knight, and dragon knight. The earth knight could be roughly divided into two stages: ordinary earth knight and elite earth knight. The earth knight who had just broken through were all ordinary earth knight. During this period of time, the total amount of do chi in their bodies would slowly increase. List was at this stage. He could feel his chi growing every day. When the total amount of do chi reached its peak and no longer increased, it meant that he had reached the level of an elite earth knight. At this stage, it was difficult to increase the total amount of do chi by simply relying on training. Many knight were trapped in this stage, and could only continue to develop the technical use of do chi. As they grew older, around 50 years old, their body functions would decline, and the total amount of do chi would gradually decline. They would degenerate from an elite earth knight to an ordinary earth knight. Today, Marcus was approaching 40 years old, and his body functions were still at its peak. In another 10 years, it would probably degenerate, and his strength would be greatly reduced. This was the reason why he was eager to make meritorious service on the battlefield. Meritorious service should be done early, and only when he was old could he enjoy it. Half of the elite earth knight had the same idea as Marcus: make meritorious service. However, some elite earth knight were not in a hurry to make meritorious service. They hoped to continue to improve their strength, such as Levis and Elvera. However, simply relying on training was not very useful. At this time, a large number of potions were needed to stimulate the body functions and continue to increase the total amount of do chi, until the quantitative change caused a qualitative change, and break through to become a sky knight. A sky knight could easily beat up 100 earth knights. If there was a good mount, it would be a killing machine on the battlefield, constantly gaining glory. After this mission is completed, I will officially enter the elite earth knight stage. List still couldn't believe it. Originally, I thought that it would take at least 3 to 5 years of training to enter the elite earth knight sequence. I didn't expect that in just half a year I would complete this process. The more he thought, the more excited he became. It was as if his whole body was emitting the light of a genius. Building 3 new workshops in the workshop area is too simple. Currently, there are 6 workshops in the workshop area: a blacksmith shop, a leathersmith shop, a mill, a carpenter shop, a tailor shop, and a locksmith shop. According to the current number of craftsman serfs, I can build a soap workshop, a wine workshop, and a hooped barrel shop. In the soap workshop, there was a soap maker, Burnell, who came from the small Kerchief Island. Not only could he make soap, but he also took over the soap, pancreas, manufacturing arranged by List. Although he had not yet completed the final soap formula, he had already made a barely usable soap. A soap workshop was his reward. In any case, it was to make money for List. In the brewery, among the craftsmen who also came from the small Kerchief Island, there was a brewer named Frank Distiller's Grains, who could make fruit wine. There were also 2 serfs who could make rice wine and beer. Currently, List had a good relationship with the heir of the Hops family, Aubrey Hops, and they often kept in touch by letter. He was able to obtain relatively cheap hops and brew his own beer. If he didn't seek to make money, and just wanted to produce and sell his own beer, then a brewery could barely be maintained. In the hoop barrel shop, among the craftsman serfs he bought, there were quite a few hoop barrel craftsmen, which was a common craft that combined carpentry and blacksmithing. Barrels were indispensable in daily life. Therefore, after the hoop barrel shop was built, sales would not be a problem. Even if there was no task, he would still build the hoop barrel shop. I just don't know if the hoop barrel shop can be considered a workshop. It should be a handicraft workshop, right? List was a little puzzled. He couldn't distinguish between a hoop barrel shop, a tailor shop, and the like. If it doesn't count, then I will build another workshop. Sooner or later, it will have to be built. A peanut processing workshop. Boiled peanuts, spiced peanuts, fried peanuts, salt and pepper peanuts, soy peanuts, peanut butter, anything that can be produced will be produced. The flour town should not directly sell primary agricultural product. The value of primary agricultural products was too low. At the very least, primary agricultural products should be processed before being sold. Chapter 150. At this stage, apart from a few shops opened by freedmen, the flour town's workshops and shops basically had to be opened by List. In any case, there were not many freedmen. List did not mind monopolizing all the industries in the flour town. After all, this was his territory. If he said to build a workshop, then the workshop could be built. But Gort had doubts. Sir, the soap workshop can be handed over to Burnell, the wine workshop can be handed over to Frank, Berdang, and Huntella, the hoop shop has many hoop craftsmen. What does the peanut processing workshop do, and who do I need to hand it over to? It is to simply process the harvested peanut. The peanuts can be boiled together with the shell, stir-fried, and sold separately. The peanuts can be sold separately, or made into peanut butter. Perhaps some unique peanut flavors can also be developed. In short, ordinary peanuts have to be made into delicious peanut. Just like how ordinary bread has to be made into pineapple buns. Who will make the delicious peanuts? Among the serfs I bought, there are some who have served as cooks in foreign castles. My castle does not need so many cooks for the time being, so let these people study how to make delicious peanuts. Remember this, Advisor Gort. Please speak. The price of the agricultural products produced in the flour town is very low and does not have the value to be traded. But after we process them, they can be sold at a good price. We can even buy agricultural products from outside and process them. I hope that the flour town can become a processing center for agricultural products. There were no words like initial processing in the serpentines. List could use the serpentines to form a word with a similar meaning, and then give a little explanation. Gort could understand. This is the same as Tulip Castle rarely selling the whole tulip magic ingredient, but rather making the tulip magic ingredient into a finished magic ingredient, and then selling it, right? You understand correctly. Then I will arrange it now. After Gort left, List also quickly left the castle. He hurried to the thorns wormstalk thicket to look for fast-growing wood thorns. Standing in the thicket, as far as the eye could see, other than the thorny thicket, there was only a barren slope in the distance. The fast-growing poisonous brambles and the fast-growing thorny brambles were separated by people, each occupying a large area. My lord! The two worm protection team members guarding the thorns wormstalk hurriedly stepped forward to greet him. He was a serf from the dairy farm. Due to his strong physique, he was selected by Rome as a worm protection team member and received a well-paid part-time job. List asked, "Did you find any unusual thorns when you were stationed in this bush?" He specifically asked Luomu to instruct the insect protection team here to pay more attention to the growth of the thorns and immediately report any special thorns. The team member hesitated for a moment. "Sir Lord, I don't know if those are unusual thorns." "Oh, what's the situation?" "There was a patch of thorns, they became very thick." "Very thick? Take me there." The insect protection team member quickly brought List to a patch of thick thorns. The color and spikes of the thorns here were just ordinary thorns, but each one was about twice as thick as the average thorns. This was clearly different, and the insect protection team member didn't even know if it was unusual, let alone report it. He was simply a pig with a brain. Of course. Commoners indeed had limited IQ. List expressed his understanding and said, "Cut off these thorns." The insect protection team did not have any iron equipment, only relatively cheap bone weapons. They hurriedly pulled out their bone knives and slashed at the thorns. Small shrubs like thorns were not difficult to cut down, not to mention they were still in their infancy. The insect protection team member was full of confidence, thinking that he could cut off the thorns with a single slash and perform heroically in front of the Sir Lord. However, the awkward thing was that when the bone knife hit the thorn's trunk, it made a crisp bang sound and bounced off, leaving only a very shallow mark. The two insect protection team members were a little flustered, waving their bone knives again and slashing vigorously. But every time they slashed at the thorn's trunk, they could only leave shallow marks. After a dozen slashes in a row, they could not cut out a crack the width of a thumb. On the contrary, their bone knives had already collapsed. It was about to break. "Stop, Thomas. Hand them my night sword and let them cut with the night sword." List's eyes lit up. He roughly understood what kind of mutation the fast-growing wood thorns were. He took the night sword. The insect protection team member continued to slash, but still could not cut it quickly. Fortunately, the night sword was made of fine steel and was very hard. Relying on constant slashing and grinding bit by bit, they finally cut off the thorns that were as thick as a wrist. Then he chopped off the small branches and chopped them into a bare thorny pole. Panting, they handed it to List. Holding the thorny pole in his hand, List could feel the weight of this wooden pole. Very heavy, very strong, and very hard. If I'm not mistaken, its wood mutation is likely to be in the direction of ironwood. Ironwood, as the name suggests, was wood as hard as steel. Many woods on Earth were known as ironwood. Like iron birch, clam wood, nanmu, and so on, they were even harder than steel. They sank in water, and insects and even nails couldn't penetrate them. Many ships, vehicles, special buildings, and even aerospace parts used ironwood as a material. The current fast-growing wood thorns were not up to the standard of ironwood. However, its fast-growing characteristic determined its value. Even if it was not up to the standard of ironwood, it was still far better than ordinary wood, and was better than steel. According to this quality, the fast-growing wood thorns are simply steel that can grow by itself. It was not that there were no ironwood quality trees in the thorn's ridge, such as rockwood, stonewood, and so on. However, their number was very small and their growth was slow. It would take hundreds of years for them to mature. The value of fast-growing wood thorns that could mature in a short period of time was so great that even List found it hard to imagine it. The previous mutation of poison and thorns is simply incomparable to the current ironwood. This is the treasure of the thorns, my thorns sprite worm. Good job, I'll give you an extra meal tonight. Eat as much jade powder as you want. This was the reward of the thorns sprite worm's chain mission, which was affected by the thorns sprite worm's worm stock. He increasingly felt that there was a chance of success for the thorns sprite worm to evolve into a thorns lesser sprite. I've decided. His mood surged, and he could no longer hold back his thoughts. I'll plant fast-growing wood thorns in the 180 mu of shrubbery directly affected by the thorns sprite worm stock. Ordinary fast-growing thorns, fast-growing poisonous thorns, and fast-growing thorny thorns should either be transplanted elsewhere or cut down. They shouldn't occupy the influence of the thorns sprite worm stock. Black Dragon gallop. It returned to the castle like the wind. He immediately planned to call the newly appointed administrative officer, Isaiah, to replan the thorns sprite worm stock shrubs. However, after his brain calmed down, he immediately thought of a key problem. The thorns sprite worm is still accumulating the power to evolve, and the chain mission is not over yet. There should still be room for the fast-growing thorns to mutate. It would be very difficult to produce new mutations if he cut down ordinary fast-growing thorns. Chapter 151. The discovery of fast-growing iron thorns was as important to Flower Town as adding a catalyst to a chemical reaction or injecting an athlete with a stimulant. Although he still had to wait for the thorn's sprite worm chain mission to be completed before large-scale planting could begin. But this did not prevent him from bringing back the trunk of the fast-growing iron thorns. At the banquet, he would convene the town's officials to study and explore its use. If it can grow to 2 meters high, then it can be used to build houses. It is much harder than the fir we use. I bet that a house built with it would be safe and sound in a storm. Blair, your consideration is not comprehensive. Wood must not only be strong, but also waterproof, moth-resistant, and rot-resistant. I don't think that my consideration is not comprehensive. You see, the wood is very compact, which is similar to the rock wood cut by the logging team. Rock wood never has worms, Blair retorted. The rock wood he was talking about was a tree called rock tree, which liked to grow in rock crevices. Rock wood was very precious. A 200-year-old rock wood could be sold for 50 silver coins. After cutting down all the trees in the Thorns Ridge, only less than 10 rock trees were found. Among them, only 3 were 200-year-old, while the other 7 were less than 200 years old. Similar to rock wood, there was also stone wood, which was also extremely rare. Gort thought of an idea. We can sink it into the water. If it sinks, it means that it is similar to rock wood. If it doesn't, it means that it is not good enough. That's right, let's give it a try. Thereupon, a servant brought a basin of water. He laboriously removed a section of the trunk and threw it into the basin. The trunk sank directly to the bottom of the basin. Upon seeing this, Blair proudly said, "Look, everyone, I never lie. Fast-growing iron thorns are as good as rock wood." Marcus, who had always been taciturn, also said, "The texture is solid and the trunk is straight. It is suitable for making the spear shaft of a knight's spear. It can also be made into arrow shaft. It should be more suitable than birch." Ordinary knight spear shafts and arrow shafts were made of birch wood. The birch city on the Coral Island specialized in planting birch trees and producing birch wood needed to make weapons. The tulip family also had a birch sprite. If it's really better than white birch, we can supply it to Tulip Castle. I believe the Earl will like better spear shafts and arrow shaft. In particular, it can reproduce quickly. This advantage is simply incredible. A rock tree that has been growing for 200 years is only as thick as a palm. This is just a seedling, but it's already as thick as a wrist. It's like I'm looking at a bush of gold coins. Haha, it's a tree that bears gold coins. Who would have thought that the most useless thorns would become the most useful wood? The banquet was filled with cheers and laughter. Everyone was looking forward to the future of the fast-growing iron thorns. Liszt waited for everyone to finish their discussion. He raised his glass and said in high spirits, "For the time being, we can't be sure that it's a money tree. You can continue to pay attention to it and research it to fully unearth its value. If it really is a money tree, it must be planted on a large scale. It would be best to plant fast-growing iron thorns in areas that cannot be reclaimed in the Thorns Ridge." Everyone raised their glasses and shouted, "As you wish, my lord." After the banquet, the slightly tipsy Liszt took a walk in the castle's manor, played with Dosen for a while, and then went back to the study to read. Recently, he was preparing to learn a foreign language, Wind language, the language of the Eagle Kingdom. At present, Flower Town only had old Grandette, who traveled extensively and knew both Serpentine and Wind language. Therefore, he temporarily handed the flower caravan over to Harpagon. Liszt himself returned to Flower Town and served as a translator, coordinating the officials to manage the 476 new serfs, while also taking care of teaching Wind language. Mastering a foreign language was still somewhat useful. However, old Grandette was busy and had no time to teach alone. Therefore, he gave Liszt a notebook from when he was learning Wind language in his early years. This notebook recorded the more everyday wind language and how to pronounce it in Serpentine. Learning was boring. At first, he felt that it was interesting, but after 2 days, he lost his patience. As he passed by the worm room, he went in and teased his sprite worms. 9 sprite worms were packed in a large box. It was like raising silkworms, but this batch of silkworms were colorful and contending with each other. He reached out and touched them one by one. The appearance of the sprite worms was very smooth and felt good to the touch. Some were lazy and motionless, some were energetic and wandered around, including the thorns sprite worm. The gray-white thorns sprite worm was not beautiful. It was the most inconspicuous among the group of sprite worms. But looking at it now, he felt that this thorns sprite worm was a bit out of the ordinary. The stimulation of alcohol made his brain slightly slow. He paused for a moment, and then suddenly, fat, the thorns sprite worm has become fat. It is obviously bigger than the other sprite worms. This is a sign of evolution. Tulip Castle raised more than 100 sprite worms. He played with sprite worms a lot when he was a child, and even witnessed 2 sprite worms break through into sprites. The biggest change in the sprite worm before the breakthrough was fat. This phenomenon was usually called the fat pupa stage. Unlike butterflies, sprites do not metamorphose, they directly become fat. In the process of becoming fat, the sprite worm will slowly decay and age. If they are unlucky, they will directly die of old age and turn into ashes. If they are lucky, one day the sprite will burst out of the skin, break out of the pupa, and fly. Fat pupa stage. Liszt was completely sober from the drunkenness. Tension spread all over his body, mixed with apprehension and surprise. The fat pupa stage was certainly a sign of evolution, but it was also a sign of death. The sprite worm would not last too long in this period, at most 1 or 2 months. There was no third option if it did not succeed or die. There is only 1 or 2 months left. I am afraid that the thorns sprite worm chain mission cannot be completed in such a short time. I must help it. The fat thorns sprite worm slithered around in the box without stopping for a moment. From time to time, it raised its head and looked at Liszt with its sesame-like eyes, expressing affection. But at the same time, Liszt could feel that there were bursts of restlessness in its emotions. Perhaps this was its desire and impulse for evolution. It had already influenced 4 kinds of mutated thorns. There was no detailed information to explain the influence of sprite worms on plants, but Liszt was convinced that it was definitely related to the emotions of the sprite worm. During this time, the thorns were very violent and continuously mutated. How can I help it? Provide it with nutrition and fertilize the worm stalk every day? Expand the area of the thorn shrubs? I feel that these are common means to help with evolution. They are effective but not decisive. The probability of evolution is more about luck. Adequate nutrition, to a large extent, could breed a sprite worm, but adequate nutrition could not guarantee that the sprite worm could break through. After thinking about it, the only thing that could really help the thorns sprite worm was the smoke mission. The thorns sprite worm chain mission must be completed as soon as possible. First of all, the current chi bottleneck mission must be completed. Starting tomorrow, I will personally supervise the construction of the workshop. He had made up his mind. Liszt put down his nervousness and looked at his sprite worm with a smile, especially the thorns sprite worm. The fateful moment had come. Little guy, come on. As if sensing Liszt's encouragement, the thorns sprite worm raised half of its body, and its sesame eyes looked at Liszt in high spirits. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.